I'd like to call to order the June 20th, 2024 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission here in the Don B. Griffin Room at Harwich Town Hall. This will, again, be a hybrid meeting. Participation is possible in person or online through GoToMeeting or just on an observer basis on the Harwich channel. In order to log in online, you can find the agenda for this evening's meeting on the Town of Harwich website, which has instructions for logging in online. So we're going to start with pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda this evening is a vote to accept and approve a conservation restriction at 61 and 77 Bells Neck Road, Herring River Land Preservation Conservation Restriction, and to send a support letter to the Select Board. Good evening.
Good evening. Michael Locke, Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust. Thanks for including us on your agenda. So as you summarized, this agenda item focuses on seeking your approval of a conservation restriction as well as your letter of recommendation to the Select Board. Note that because of the tight time constraint in moving this through the multi-layer approval process, both at the municipal level here and at the state level, in order to do so before the end of the current fiscal year, June 30th, we met with the Select Board earlier this week on Monday. They did vote to approve contingent on your review and approval vote. So that's what we seek here tonight for the properties listed at 61 and 77 Bells Neck Road. By way of background, this conservation restriction was approved by town meeting voters in 2023 in Article 24, but that town meeting article needed a revision, and it did receive town meeting voter support unanimously as Article 23 in this past May 6, 2024 town meeting.
Thank you. Amy, do you have any words for us on this?
Just another real quick refresher. The commission did approve, this is a home on this property a couple of years ago. They have since now selling to the Harwich Conservation Trust. It's a total of 5.38 acres. It abuts current town conservation land and is down the street from the conglomeration that is the Bells Neck Conservation Area. The commission at the time did see this as a very highly important property to protect given its location. So I would recommend that you approve of the and sign the conservation restriction, which I actually have the paperwork here for everybody to sign, as well as officially send a letter of support, even though it's a little bit after the fact, just for their records. And I also have that.
Okay, thank you. Comments from commissioners? Wayne?
No comment.
No comment. Brad?
None.
I have no comments either. Are there comments from the public? Anyone in the room? Hearing nothing in the room. Anyone online? Hearing none. HCT.
HCT.
Was that my voice getting echoed back? So, okay. HCT was so kind as to prepare language for a motion. Would someone like to make such a motion?
It was in your packet of materials that was on your table.
Is it in the hard copies?
Yes, hard copy that was on the table tonight. I have it here. If somebody would like it.
Why don't you give it to me? Thank you very much. Okay. I will move that we accept and approve the Bells Neck Road Herring River Land Preservation Conservation Restriction on the land at 61 and 77 Bells Neck Road, Harwich. Assessors map 1-8, lots K2 and K6, granted by the Harwich Conservation Trust to the Harwich Conservation Commission, subject to approval by the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, who may make minor revisions thereto, and that we recommend Select Board approve of the conservation restriction.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
So I believe that's 501.
Yep, so here, Wayne, pass it around, but
Yeah, don't.
I did just notice that the names are not quite correct on here. I crossed them out. I'm not sure how they're gonna view that,
Okay.
but we'll see.
Yes.
So please sign where your name is, and then this one is particularly for John. And then Sophia, if you could give it to Mike, that would be great.
Thank you all very much, and on behalf of the Harwich Conservation Trust Board of Trustees, we have the President, Tom Evans, in the audience, and we are very appreciative of this ongoing partnership between the town of Harwich, and in particular, the Conservation Commission and the Select Board, the Community Preservation Committee, as we seek to preserve these sensitive watershed lands.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have a request for a change in plan at 26 Old Campground Road, map 30, parcels C6, C7, C8, and C9, SE 32-2443, for revisions including a patio around the pool area and connections to the rear deck and side door, a front walkway, a generator, a propane tank, and a pool heater.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you. Do we have,
And just a quick question, is that paperwork still making its way around so Mike can leave?
oh, yeah, it's in front of me. Do we have a proponent for this in the room?
I don't see Mr. O'Reilly present. Maybe we could table this till later, to see if he comes.
Okay, we don't need a motion or a vote for that.
No,
We'll
just table it
hang
till
on.
later in the meeting.
Okay.
He didn't ask if he had to attend. We did have some email correspondence today about it, and he didn't ask whether or not he needed to come. He does know that I have a suggestion for it, so.
Okay, so we'll hold off and let it slide until the end and see if he shows up. So next on the agenda is notice of intent. For Hinckley's Pond, Herring River Headwaters, Jenkins Bog, map 81, parcels G1, G2-1, G2-2, G2-3, and G2-4-1, and Jacob Brown 2, Warner Bog, map 30, parcel B2, for ecological restoration. And there has been a request for a continuance
July 3rd.
to July 3rd. Okay, does someone want to let me know that we did not?
Yeah, I'll go like it right.
Okay, so next on the agenda is, do we have to vote on the continuance?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have a motion for that?
Sure.
Just, sorry, I need to recuse myself.
Okay, there's still 4 of us here, so, okay.
Okay, I'll move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent for Harwich Conservation Trust, Hinckley's Pond - Herring River Headwaters, Jacobs Bog, map 81, parcels G1, G2-1, G2-2, G2-3, and G2-4-1, and Jacob Brown 2, Warner Bob map 90, parcel B2, and that we continue this to our meeting, or the meeting of the Conservation Commission on July 3rd, 2024.
Seconded.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
So, 501. Now, we are at, a notice of intent for 23 Davis Lane, map 8, parcel N6, to demolish a single-family dwelling and accessory structure and construct a new dwelling, pool, and hardscape.
Good evening.
Good evening.
David Little, CC from Blue Flax Design. Dave Hawk, Hawk Design, and Tom and Lonnie Cosmer are over in the, to your right. So we provided the commission with revised plans which reflect both your comments and requests from the first hearing we had quite a while ago. It took us a while to get back here because the lift to provide you with the restoration and land management plan for the coastal bank, it was quite a bit of work, but we turned it around fairly quickly and we're back before you. We reduced the hardscape in the 0 to 50-foot buffer as was requested at the last hearing, and we've also reduced it more in the 50 to 100-foot buffers. We're now down to a 105 square foot reduction in the 0 to 50, and we've reduced the coverage in the 50 100 from 1025 to 818. Dave Hawk has also included a drought-tolerant fescue. I believe that was a request that we provide that to you at the last hearing. I provided you a coverage calculation plan from Ryder and Wilcox along with the site plan, but most importantly, the Blue Flax design, restoration plan, and land management plan is the biggest change that we've done here. We still have mitigation proposed from the top of the coastal bank landward on the property, but in addition to that, we now have the land management plan and restoration plan before you. So I'm going to turn it over to Cece from Blue Flax. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Cece Camilleri with Blue Flax Design. Blue Flax is proposing to manage approximately 4,854 square feet of invasive species on the coastal bank at this property. And we plan to restore the area with an appropriate maritime native plant community. In addition to that 4,854 square feet of invasive species, we're proposing an additional 1,072 square feet of mitigation at the top of Coastal Bank as a vegetated buffer strip in order to enhance the integrity and ecological function of the resource area. And the coastal bank at 23 Davis Lane is heavily infested with Japanese knotweed. And the knotweed is mostly confined just to this property. And we feel that it's very important to get in there and manage and remove the knotweed before it spreads to the adjacent properties on either side of 23 Davis Lane. And it will be a significant improvement to the coastal bank and to the coastal dune resource areas. We'll also be removing sycamore maple, white poplar, black swallowwort, border privet, vine honeysuckle, bittersweet, multiflora rose, and mugwort from the coastal bank resource area. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on our mitigation and our invasive species management.
Thank you. Who else?
Just your
Yeah,
addition.
I'll briefly chime in. Thanks. Dave Hawk from Hawk Design. Good evening, everyone. From our standpoint, we did reduce the rear terrace. We pulled that radius in. you'll see the circular terrace in the side yard. That was pulled back further out of the 50. And as mentioned by Cece, we still have approximately 1,200 square feet of buffer along that top of Coastal Bank. That's about a 43% reduction, but obviously we've got a management plan in here too, so we kept the bulk of that, close to 57% of that buffer strip in there. And from that standpoint, I think that's all we have. We did not include foundation beds or anything like that, so with that, I guess we'd entertain any questions the commission might have.
Thank you. Amy?
Just a few quick things. Thank you for taking the commission's, my comments to heart, and reworking your plan a little bit to get a little bit more further reduction in the hardscape in the 0 to 50, and reducing a little bit what you're proposing to add in the 50 to 100. It was very nice to meet the Cosmers on the site when we were doing our site visit, and just hear how much they appreciate the property and how much they're hoping to save some of the really interesting cherry trees and other plants that you have there. I do believe that they are good stewards of their property next door, and will be good stewards of this property. This property, as I've said at the previous meeting, has quite an invasive population. It's pretty much solely invasive on the coastal bank, and to be able to be rid of that, it would be a very big benefit for the stability of the bank, for the habitat value of the bank, just the species diversity. And as the infestation of primarily knotweed only goes a little bit over either side on either property line, should this pass this evening, my recommendation to the commission would be that if the owner, one of which is this owner, and then the owner to the east, if they had wanted to include the small area on their properties that had infestations, that we would be happy to review that potentially in a minor fashion, to really get all of the knotweed in particular out. In addition to the coastal bank work, they have it added an additional buffer strip on the top of the property. Doing those quick pop calculations, the buffer strip is almost a 1-to-1 with the proposed new structure in the 50 to 100. And then in addition to that, I do view, professionally speaking, the work that you're proposing on the bank itself to be mitigation for the work that you're doing. And I would be in favor and recommend approval of the project as presented, with the condition that if there are foundation plantings, that any plantings in the 0 to 50 be native.
We've specified that out,
Yep.
so those are natives, and we'll keep it
Perfect.
as such.
Thank you. Sophia?
I agree with Amy. I also feel like this is a overall just service to the environment around the property, and it looks great. I'm just curious, if you don't mind me picking your brain, Cece, on something. The vegetated buffer strip, so the native seed mix is under that?
Yeah, so the vegetated buffer strip right now is lawn, so we would remove the lawn. We would lay down our native seed mix there, probably in conjunction with the invasive species removal on the bank, so all of that would just be seeded at once.
Okay.
And then we would come and plant the vegetated buffer strip, likely before we would plant the coastal bank, because we'll need to manage the invasive species for a couple of years at least before we can replant it with native species.
So you skip the seed mix under the shrubs on the coastal bank so that you can get to the invasive species to control them over time?
We go on the coastal bank, we remove the invasive species, we blanket and seed the bank so that it's stable, because for a short while there will be no vegetation, and we'll just get in there to manage particularly the knotweed. And then once that is more under control, we will kind of go into the blanket and plant our shrubs.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah.
Looks great. I have no other comments.
I have no remarks, other than it looks pretty good.
Thank you.
No comments?
No comment.
Only question I have, I noticed you got to treat the knotweed with an EPA-approved systemic herbicide. Which one?
We use glyphosate and triclopyr.
At what ratio?
It's a low ratio, and if Teresa is on, she may be able to speak more clearly to the correct ratio of herbicide that we use, but we do use a cut and wipe method. It's very localized, very controlled. It does not spread, and we are very particular and careful with the way that we apply herbicide.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't have any questions or comments myself. I agree with Amy. Do we have comments from the public in the room? Anyone here care to comment? Anyone online? Sounds like no. So we could entertain a motion from someone in the room, someone on commission?
Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion that we approve the notice of intent for, let's see, for 23 Davis Lane, map 8, parcel M6, with the condition that any foundation planting within the 0 to 50-foot buffer be native species.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
6-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have notice of intent for 9 Fiddler's Landing, map 6, parcel A1-9, for an elevated hot tub and planting.
My name is Dana Schock. I am a landscape architect. This is helping out on this project. This is I'm representing Caroline Lucy, who is the owner of this property, who is an old client of mine. I did her first house in Harwich Port. I was in front of you folks back then on Dunes Road, which was a significant project. This is a very, very modest project. She has recently purchased this house and wants to plunk down a hot tub, the old above-ground wood-sided hot tubs. That's about the extent of this job. But it is within the buffer zone, so that's why we're here in front of you. So Amy and I met a couple of times out there too, maybe 3 times, and explored 4 different places on this. And starting out behind, if you look at that plan, out behind the shower area, another one up closer to the back door, and another one off where the terrace was notched, which all of these clearly were closer to the coastal bank. And not only that, they required a little more invasive construction. Sort of the one in the terrace sort of required blowing out a wall, and the other ones altering the wood deck. And so we found a spot that wasn't as great to sit in your hot tub, but much more workable with what we were working with in the land. And this is sort of off the side yard and towards the front of the house. And it's a lot easier because all this, whatever we do to bring this hot tub in and plunk it down, can all be accessed from the front yard now. We don't even have to come around the backyard or do any of this. There's no construction per se. This is a 7 by 7 foot hot tub. The other thing is the mechanicals are already over there on the house. Their condensers, their generator. So it's sort of a utilitarian section of the house. So I'm going to keep this really simple. The footprint of this is 7 by 7. So I'm going to put in an open graded base on this to level it. Permeable pavers just directly under the footprint of this, just retained by some cobblestone. That's the level of, if you want to call that construction, but it's just sort of handwork primarily. And then we're going to There's right now a tall arborvitae hedge that sort of wraps the property on that corner. We were going to open this up, non-native species, just take a small corridor of that at the front side of the hot tub, just to give a view to the water, and replace that. I put a list there of natives with prairie rose and geranium, hay-scented fern. We're going to strip out a small area of maybe 100 square feet of grass and replace that with hay-scented ferns. We're also, this was previously, you would know better, this project was done, someone ahead of me did a project off the back that I'm sure they were in front of you, where there was a terrace built and this and that. And I'm going to actually, as part of this project, across the entire length of the coastal bank, I'm going to expand the non-mow area by 5 feet across that whole thing, which originally was indicated on that plan. And I don't know if the previous owners sort of did it and got approval, and that now it's sort of drifted away and been eliminated, but I'm going to bring that back. That's about almost 1,200 square feet of removal of lawn and, again, expanding the non-mowable area. And that's sort of it. It's, again, just sort of placing this above ground. We all know what the hot tubs look like. Just a hot tub at grade in the side yard.
Okay. Amy?
Yes, we did meet on the site a couple of times and looked at the various locations, all of which were closer to the top of the coastal bank than this. The two options, as I would see them, would be within the patio, raised patio itself, or where it's presented now. They are requesting a variance from the 50-foot buffer for this work. In regards to the strip, I do believe when we granted a certificate of compliance, it was there, so I think it
Yeah.
has since been removed. I don't know if it's by previous owner or current owner, but I don't view that as mitigation, bringing that back as mitigation for this, because it never should have
No,
left.
understood.
Yeah.
Understood. I just wanted to just
Yeah.
make clear our efforts
We
to
appreciate that. Yeah.
follow what should be there, the intent of what was originally required. And we're adding some viburnum also,
Yep.
which is not required, but just doing it because I think it's important.
So I think a good way potentially to make sure that stays there a little is not just to let it be a no-mow, but to enhance it with a few clumps of shrub plantings along.
Yeah, that would be fine.
I think that might dissuade mowers a little bit more than just having, because how are they gonna know exactly where
Yeah.
the no-mow is? In terms of the project, the hot tub itself, the hot tub is roughly 45 feet away from the top of bank, which is a bulkheaded top of bank. I don't see that's gonna have any negative impact to the resource area. However, it is new structure in the 0 to 50, and I'd like to see some effort from the homeowner to be a better steward of the property. They're also not supposed to be fertilizing.
We discussed that,
Doing
you and I. I
pesticides.
think she has just, maybe within the last 6 weeks. Well,
Okay.
I could look up a closing date, just recently moved in.
Yeah.
And I don't think, frankly, she spent much time there. She lives, I believe, in Boston.
Yeah.
She's a weekender down here.
There's no diversity at all. It's all just one
Yeah,
monoculture.
you and I saw evidence
So,
of that.
yes, my perspective is what's being proposed is not going, in my opinion, have a negative impact to the coastal bank. But I'm not seeing a big positive either. So I don't really have a recommendation to the commission on this one.
Okay. Commissioners, Wayne.
I don't have any problem with it. I think it's kind of minor myself.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I think I agree with Wayne. It's kind of a minor change. And I don't really have any other comments on it.
So you know what I'm gonna say? I certainly don't support it. It's a new structure in the 0 to 50 no disturb zone. It requires a variance to do so. I haven't supported variances in the no disturb zone for 15 years. I'm not going to start tonight with a hot tub. I realize it's relatively benign, but I'm also concerned about this property. We had conditions to not fertilize, and if you look over Google Earth over numerous years, just bright green every year. And I recognize it's a new property. I recognize you're here for a single purpose, but I need to speak up about this.
No, Amy and I talked to, and I have no history with this property, with past owners or.
I understand
Yeah, I
that.
want to be clear. So we discussed this, am I right, when I was out there, and I didn't, yeah.
Right, I understand,
Yeah.
it's not your burden, but
Yeah.
I feel compelled to talk about it. If you go out to Allen's Harbor right now, it's a sickly green-brown. Same with Witchmere Harbor. It happens every spring now when people start to fertilize their lawns. This didn't occur 20 years ago.
Right.
These harbors had clear, clean water. It's appalling, and it's getting worse all the time. Properties like this that have that type of fertilizing occurring, it's irresponsible, and it really needs to stop. So, back to the reality of this project, it is just a hot tub in the 0 to 50, but to my reading of our regulations, we don't allow new structures in the 0 to 50 no disturb zone. It can be approved with mitigation. You're approving that, you're proposing mitigation. I just don't think it's a necessary structure to have a variance in no disturb zone, so I don't support this.
I don't see this being of a particular consequence. I do share Brad's concern, however, about the fertilization. That's a big deal. This is an opportunity going forward with a new client and a new owner to certainly do better. And I would optimistically look for that. The hot tub itself, I would argue that it's a movable apparatus, just like a bench or any other item. So, given the size of it, I don't see it being a detriment. That's all.
I think I align with Brad on this one. I find this landscape to be, and I realize it's not them, but I find it to be honestly kind of offensive to look at. The whole street is like green lawns, boxwoods, just like mowing the no-mow area. I mean, it's just like so unacceptable, and I get that it's just a hot tub. It's just, I mean, people need to do better in order to get things like this. It's like if you can't even, I'm glad to see that they're moving in the right direction. I think on this one, I found it so just like disturbing, and I have a high tolerance for that, I think. But maybe less and less, I am with Brad, I don't like it, so, no.
And I don't support this myself. And it is a green lawn. You don't have to look at Google Earth. You could just go there and look at the lawn, and it's very clearly been treated. And it is a new owner. But part of the problem here, particularly with absentee owners, weekenders, people who don't spend a lot of time, they hire a landscaper, and the landscaper will by default, you have to argue with a landscaper to get them to stop putting fertilizer on your lawn. And maybe that doesn't even work. So the message has to go not just to the owners, but to the professionals who care for these properties. And by default, they assume that owners of high-end houses want bright green lawns. And I think it is a problem. It's a big problem. And I also agree that this is an unnecessary accessory, that I can see how people would like it, but I don't really support granting it. And, Sophia's suggesting that there could be a lot more care taken of this place in a much more waterways-friendly way, and I think it's time to make a point about that myself. So I would
Okay,
support it.
I understand all that, and I'm support all of that. At the same time, I feel like this person who just recently purchased this is being severely penalized. I know you made a comment, the whole street, I hate the whole street, it's this or that. She's paying the price for past owners and current owners that she has zero connection to. So I'm sure she would be amenable to cutting out the fertilizer, turn the irrigation off. Maybe she wouldn't be, but I would certainly bring that up to her. But I feel like all the comments the people who are not in support of this are penalizing her for, she's literally just bought this house. And I get your sentiment. I truly do. I support it. I've been a landscape architect for 45 years working on properties like this. And, but I'm just listening to you and comments about, and I feel like she's taken the brunt of the errors of the past that other people have been making and their disregard for conservation. That's just my final.
The technical point is the point that Brad makes, that
I mean, if it's a point that,
no new structure
Right.
within the 50, and Mark made a point that it's portable, but I think you're hooking it up in utilities. I don't think someone's.
no, if the reason is we absolutely, without exception, allow any new structures within the 50, no, that's it. Rubber stamp, we do not allow any. That's what I'll live with. But if it's based on the conglomeration of houses down the street with the green laws and the crummy planting and the fertilizer going into the, I feel like she's being unfairly hit with that. So, but if it's, which she doesn't control any of these abutters or neighbors or anyone on Fiddler's Lane, she just purchased this house. But if your reasoning is, this is what we stand by, we do not allow new structures in the 50, then that's something that I'll convey to her and we'll all have to live with.
Could I follow when he's finished?
Please do. Are you all set?
Yes, that
A
was,
key point in our narrative, in our regulations on having variances to the no disturb zone is that it's a hardship. It can be done otherwise, but typically when it's been granted, in my term, it's been because it's been a hardship. I don't see a hardship with a hot tub in the 0 to 50.
I'm not gonna argue that there's a hardship. I would never do that. This is something that
It's
you would like
pretty stern
and
language.
enjoy.
It-
So
it should-
no, I would never argue this is a hardship and she needs to have a high, for her quality of life. I would never argue that. This is obviously something that,
By definition, it should be rare, a variance to this type of a no disturb zone structure. So it's something that I think we've been granting recently, and it concerns me, but I've never supported it. And I think there are very few cases where I think the letter of our bylaws are met with structures. And further, what you see is people encroach all the time. So I know it's a new owner, and I respect that, but at the same time, we see tremendous cases of encroachment in the 0 to 50. with
I'm sure you do.
new
It happens
ownerships.
all the time.
All the time.
You know how many appointments I've gone to with clients? I've done a lot of work on the coastal bank, a lot. And people, homeowners come in, I own it, I paid for it, I'm a taxpayer in town, this is what I'm gonna do. And I've sat down with people and say, it's not gonna happen, you're not gonna, and I explain the buffer zones and the coastal banks, and people go, the old adage, ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So, and a lot of people have that attitude. And when I met with this woman right up front, I said, as soon as I pulled out the site plan and I walked the property, I knew immediately what the situation was, and I said, we're doing filing here. There's no question about it. You're not gonna, she didn't suggest we do this. This was just, I'm telling her before she opens up this discussion. I go, we're not gonna sneak in this hot tub, and I was explaining how towns work with permitting and things like that. You pull a building permit, electrical permit to wire the hot tub, that goes down to conservation, they see I go, so we're doing a filing. So I go, nobody's, and again, she wasn't suggesting we do that. I was just saying to her. So, I've done, as I
I think we
said.
appreciate that you
Yeah.
followed that process.
So I educate people on all of these jobs I do on the coast, which is a lot. I did one up on Gloucester Harbor that took 3 years in approvals, but it got approved. But it was, it's a process. So, anyways, I guess that's it then.
So does Mark.
Quick question. Had you considered putting the hot tub on the existing patio?
Absolutely. That was my first suggestion.
Okay, so please share with me, because you've got my opinion. This apparatus can fit right there. It's
It's
a
got-
portable item.
First thing I said to him, we were walking it, and I go, and it's a no-brainer. The terrace is already built, stone wall around it, plunk the thing right on it. And that may be a last resort thing, but she's got like a lot of these, there's furniture all over and a fire pit, and, it's just packed with stuff. And you gotta get rid of this to put this in, and so I said, and that's what makes sense too, in the chain of events. I go, well, let me present this, and if we can get it where you would like to do it, and if we can't, then we go to Plan B, Plan C, whatever. So this was Plan A, to talk to you folks. And of course, I'll reintroduce that and say, do you want to, move stuff around on your terrace and put it in there? They'd have to do a lot. It'll be a lot of work, because you have to bust the whole terrace out to get an electric line out there. But it is what it is.
Okay. Do we have further comments? Peter?
Well, I just have one comment. It seems from this discussion, maybe the right way to proceed would be to continue this hearing for you to go back to your client and see whether or not the concerns of this commission can be addressed.
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sensing there might be a draw vote here potentially, or have it not be successful for you, so it may be a good idea to continue and go talk to your client.
Well,
and-
what would you suggest? I mean, in some sort of document that states no fertilizer, no irrigation? I mean, how do you, what would you be looking for?
We're not opposed to irrigation necessarily, it's
Well-
things that often sometimes go with that. But that would be a question for the commission, but just seeing how they would like, how your client would like to proceed. It does seem that the commission is mainly viewing it as a structure in the 0 to 50, and that would be the main
Yeah,
rationale.
if that's been the main thing, then
Yeah, and we talked
there's
about
no
it on site.
mitigation
yeah,
there.
right,
If it's a
right.
question of the bias, or, the green lawns, and of course, that's, unless someone's there checking all the time, it's somewhat on the honor system, you know how that works. Well, we're only gonna use organics, or, I think we all know how that works, but if this vote is driven by, we don't allow structures in the 50-foot no disturb, then there's no, what am I gonna discuss with her? If it's not gonna go in that, it sounds to me like the only alternative to this is to put it on her stone terrace that's there now, in which case we wouldn't be discussing this anyways, because that's obviously a previously disturbed built area that's all. So I don't know what I really appreciate that comment, but I don't know what I could go hand in hand with and have a discussion with her that would help move this along.
Well, I guess, would you want us to vote and potentially not have it go in your favor, or would you prefer to withdraw or continue? Those are what I see your
Well,
options.
no, I guess we have to call for a vote. I don't, you know what I mean, Amy? I don't know what I could offer you that, I don't think I can sway your position on it, because I'm not, no matter what, I'm trying to get this hot tub in that location. And I know these two gentlemen will, that's, no matter what we do, that's not gonna happen. So, Sophia would be in that boat too. So if it's, I think, to me, the only alternative is to put it on the terrace, because the other three, you would agree, are more impactful. So the
correct. Yep.
other three areas we explored, we tried to find between the two of us the less invasive spot, for lack of a better term. So we moved it back as far as we could get, and with the least construction footprint at all, like almost nothing to put this thing. You're driving it in from the front yard and dropping it down. So, but that's what it is. It's a structure within the 50 feet. That's not gonna change. So I don't know what I could bring to the table or talk to her about beyond saying the only place this will get approved, or it doesn't have to get approved, I guess, if it's on top of that terrace. It's not a,
Probably administrative, because it is still
Yeah.
activity in our area, but we'd have to change the,
yeah.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't require a hearing, I don't think, correct?
as long as there was no expansion of footprint, I don't see why.
Yeah. Which there wouldn't be. So, I don't know, I'm looking for opinions from all of you on that. You know what I mean? If we're still trying to keep it in that spot, I don't know what I can ask her. What can we give up on this thing to make this more amenable? I don't know what we can give up if it's staying in that same location.
I personally would encourage you to do, as Amy suggested, and come back for administrative review. It would be a much simpler process. Otherwise, I'm happy to make a motion at this point if you want to document that. But I think the best path for you is to go back to your client and discuss the situation. But it's truly up to you, whether you continue.
But do you agree that if it stays in that location, that there won't be a change in voting status, I would guess?
Well, who knows? Who knows? I can't speak to that. It would require a variance. And you are hearing some folks strongly believe that this does not qualify for a variance.
Right.
So, those are your options. Continue, call for a vote, or withdraw. I think the administrative review path, if it's acceptable to your client, that seems like the best avenue for you. But it is your choice.
Okay, I mean, I'm just trying.
That's why I suggested a continuance, so you could talk to her about it.
Okay, all right, let's do that, and then, let's,
And you don't have, if you have a conversation with her, and I'm happy to speak with her as well, I met her the other day. If you may not, let's continue to a date certain, and then if you don't need that date, if you make the decision to go administrative, or you want to push the vote, then we can do that.
Okay.
But at least let's get something on the books,
okay.
okay? So our next dates for hearings are the 3rd of July, or the 17th.
Probably be the 17th.
You don't want to be here the night before the 4th?
I got a big group coming in.
Me too. They're still coming, even if I'm here. 17th.
Yeah, probably.
All right, so July 17th.
And I'll talk to you ahead of that, Amy. After
Yeah,
that,
and I'm happy
I'll
to
talk
speak with
her.
both you and Mrs. Lucy.
Yeah.
okay?
So before we proceed, there's at least one more comment from the commission.
Oh, sorry,
I just had
Sophia.
a quick clarification too, that the no-mow zone should be happening now, because it is part of this old plan, correct?
As far as I know, I was not involved in the old plan. That was just picked up off the site plan that I was working from. I was not part of that project.
That's something I can put in writing to the new owners.
Okay.
Yeah.
No mow and no fertilizer, no chemicals, nothing.
Yep, I can do that,
That's on the deed.
regardless of, right, it's an outstanding, it's a condition that got continued with the certificate of compliance, didn't get closed out.
I think it's fair to say that if it was the same owner, we would have an enforcement action on both those items. And I think we're understanding it's a new owner, so we're not moving in that direction, but those are both violations to the previous order.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I have to ask if there's any public comment here. Anybody care to speak on this in the room or online? Doesn't appear so.
Okay, so hearing no comments, I will make a motion that we continue the public hearing on the notice of intent for 9 Fiddler's Landing, map 6, parcel A1-9, to our meeting of July 17th. Amy, is that
Yes.
correct? July 17th, 2024.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
6 and 0. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Theophilus F. Smith Road, map 55. I should say Theophilus F.
Orange.
Smith Road, Dennis, map 55, parcel H3-11,
Jim.
for a recharging water station.
Good evening. I'm Mike Glavin, the Public Works Director for the town of Dennis. And with me is Carolyn Heisen, who is a Senior Water Resource Engineer for CDM Smith. We're before the commission this evening, asking you to approve our monitoring plan. So it's really not the recharge area or really anything that's going on in Dennis. It's actually strictly just the monitoring plan itself is what we're asking for you to okay. And I'm really going to let Carolyn go into it, and then we can answer questions as you go.
Yeah. So to let you know, this is probably something that you have never seen before, because this was not something that DEP requested for groundwater discharge permits until recently. So we have gone in front of the Conservation Commission for the town of Dennis because the projected potential impacts are underneath a parcel within Harwich. We are also here in front of you. So to that end, you have received a lot of information, and I apologize for that because it is a lot of information, and we're trying to figure out exactly what the different conservation commissions need to distill down. So what you have in front of you, should have the presentation slides that I'm walking through today. You should have a groundwater and surface water monitoring plan that shows where we're going to be monitoring, and that is what we're asking you to approve today. And then also is a brief memo that outlines the current delineated potential area of impact. And if you want to get into groundwater modeling, I'm happy to talk about it. But suffice to say, we've been working with Mass DEP to develop the potential area of impact. This doesn't mean that this is what's going to actually happen. They define these areas to identify places where they need to be concerned about wetlands potentially, or concerns about depth of water or other potential water rise impacts. So that's that last part today. So to begin with, so right now, Mass DEP is currently reviewing what's called a hydrogeologic evaluation for Dennis. The infiltration basins, these infiltration basins will be on a parcel within Dennis. However, when water's put in, it will spread out, and there will be a potential for slight mounding within underneath the cranberry bog within Harwich. And also there will be discharge of that treated treated effluent to Hideaway Creek, which feeds into Swan Pond and then goes out through the Swan Pond River. Mass DEP wetland staff has conducted site walks with us. They have looked at the potential issues. They have talked about monitoring plans with us. The Town of Dennis Conservation Commission did approve an order of conditions on June 6th, and that was specifically for the location that the parcel within Dennis, but it was the monitoring plan that they approved. Currently, you are reviewing the plan for potentially impacted Harwich wetlands, so that's a cranberry bog adjacent to the site. And then once all of these approvals have been done, and DEP has also agreed that we have shown sufficient information for the hydrogeologic evaluation, and that is approved, then Mass DEP issues a groundwater discharge permit, and there's a public comment process for that. So it is a long process, and it is probably something new potentially for all of you if you haven't dealt with any kind of groundwater discharge permitting. So the area of potential impact. So this is a groundwater modeling exercise that we do. We're looking at 80% of the maximum day flow at the site over 90 days. So basically it's a pretty conservative long-term approach. You're not going to be putting the maximum flow for 90 days. There's a bunch of dotted lines. So you can see that up there on the right is the cranberry bog that's within the town of Harwich, and that there is a indication that after 90 days, there could be a potential for a 0.1 foot rise in water levels beneath the cranberry bog. And if you do your math, that's about 2 to 3 inches. So we're talking about 2 to 3 inches. And if you know anything about kettle ponds on Cape Cod or groundwater on Cape Cod, it fluctuates by several feet. So basically, there might be a slight rise in water beneath the cranberry bog. Up to 1 to 6 inches. We have done a site walk with the owner of that property and talked to him about that property. Cranberry bogs control their water level by controlling their drainage. So they have these flumes at the bottom, and they put logs. And, they flood them at particular times. They flood them in the spring for weed and pest control. They'll flood them in the fall for harvest, and they'll flood them in the winter for protection during freezing periods. So they're regularly used to raising and lowering their water levels. The owner of the property was not concerned about a 1 to 6 potential rise in water levels. We are going to be doing some wetlands monitoring. All of the wetlands monitoring is going to be happening within the town of Dennis. There is no proposed wetlands monitoring within the town of Harwich, and that is because the only wetland that is in the area of potential impact within the town of Harwich is a cranberry bog, which is an agricultural wetland. So there's really nothing there to monitor. But just wanted to let you know that there is a wetlands monitoring portion of this. The part I'm specifically wanting your input on and questions on is the groundwater and surface water monitoring. So this is something that is a standard part of groundwater discharge permits. You can see there the pink kind of squares. Those are going to be the infiltration basins. They're basically big sand beds. You pour the water and it goes into the ground and flows away. We put in up gradient and cross gradient and down gradient monitoring wells. These do a couple things. They tell us what the water levels are so that we can see how the water level's responding as we put more flow on and less flow. We also position them to intercept any potential flow that's coming out of the infiltration basins so that we can do water quality. So one of the major keys here is doing water quality sampling to make sure that we're knowing what kind of nutrients and other potential, if there's any other potential contaminants in the future that would be identified, we'd be able to track them and see how much flow was actually coming, how much load was actually coming through. So in particular, there's a couple of CDM 17-1 and CDM 17-2 that we'll be monitoring, that will be giving us information about the quality of water that is flowing potentially towards Harwich. And then we are also going to be measuring at the downstream end of the existing active cranberry bogs. We're just going to be measuring the surface water in the cranberry bog. And that gives us an idea of how well they're connected. So some bogs are connected really well to the groundwater, and some bogs have a really nice layer of peat underneath them that holds the water. And so we will be collecting monthly surface water data and comparing that to the groundwater data to see how they compare and get an understanding of if there is an actual interaction between them or not. And that is my last slide. And I just do want to say we have done, as part of the modeling exercise, we actually looked to where potential effluent discharges, and it all discharges at the rates that we're looking at within the town of Dennis, not within the town of Harwich. So it's all going to go to Swan Pond. So really, I'm in front of you asking if it's okay that if you have any concerns about increasing water levels beneath the cranberry bog, 6 inches. Potentially, and we're going to be monitoring this. And is there any questions you have about that monitoring? And how many annual reports would you like from us once we start this project? Did I get everything?
Pretty close. I will just add, so like Harwich, the nitrogen loading is really what this project is really all about. So I know you talked about water quality and fertilization. That's really what this plant main goal is for the septic systems in our community that have impaired the Swan River Basin, that entire area. And so really that's what one of the ultimate goals of this is to be highly treated effluent, removing that nitrogen so that we can fix these impaired water bodies. So while it's really kind of not really what we're here, I just making a comment with fertilizers today kind of hit home and kind of what we're trying to do here as well too, because it's our sanitary septic is a big add to that issue with our water quality, as well as everybody wanting those beautiful green lawns. But that's really what's driving this, is for us to take care of these nitrogen impaired water bodies.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you. I just have a few questions and comments. So I know the town of Dennis has been undergoing this for quite some time. It is the Conservation Commission's kind of first stab and look at a lot of this. So it's a lot of information to kind of absorb in a short period of time. And, most recently got some new information rather quickly. So I don't, not gonna probably have a recommendation to the board tonight for that. There's some more information that I'd like to get from you, and potentially the town is interested in, having a third-party review of the notice of intent, just again, to make sure, their interests are protected. And, we're all in favor of treating the wastewater, of course. But this is something completely new to us, and definitely new to me, is reviewing, I mean, I reviewed stormwater permits, but not something quite like this. So, a couple of my questions were answered, kind of the status of the groundwater discharge permit with DEP. They require the filing with us. They're currently looking at the hydrogeologic evaluation, from what I understand.
They are currently reviewing the hydrogeologic evaluation, yes.
Yep, thank you.
And they asked for your input on the monitoring plan.
Yep, and you filed the EIR with MIPA.
The MEPA permits have already all been approved.
I have been approved, okay. Is this gonna require a conservation management permit with natural heritage?
It is
No.
Okay. Okay.
And I do want to put out, so we as the community have BSE environmental scientists on board. I know you reached out for peer review, and actually, we have them on board already working with us to look at some of the other resource areas in Dennis. There are no resource areas in Harwich that require their review. We have CDM Smith, who is doing our hydrological, and then we also have GHD, who is doing peer review of everybody. And then you have Mass DEP, who we're doing bi-weekly meetings, looking at all of this and actually asking how they want to see these models run. There was a meeting yesterday with some of their water quality folks to talk about how they want these models run. So you really have, in addition to everything the town of Dennis is doing, you have Mass DEP, which I would say is probably one of your best peer reviews. It's not only is it the southeast region, but it's also Boston. So you have a nitrogen sensitive group that's meeting every Wednesday, reviewing this project specifically, as well as a working group from all of the different branches within DEP that are looking at this, and they're all back consulting with the Boston group as well too, to put this out there. So there are a lot of folks who are a lot smarter than me looking at this project. So I understand completely where you're coming, but really, what we're talking about in Harwich is measuring from the top of the control gate to the water level once a month. That's all we're really talking about in Harwich, and that's just to make sure what we're seeing in the models, we're seeing in the field. Our hope is actually in the future we can put more water up there, but we want to know, we have to have baseline data, what's there, and then see, are we seeing any effect down here? And as I wrote in today, I kind of laughed looking at all the cranberry bogs down the road irrigating. That's where this water is going to end up, is in that irrigation fund that's right there, which is, and you can well imagine, is coming up and down feet right now, and probably has almost no water in it in August. So we would actually be helping that operation. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, up until today, I didn't have an understanding of just how much you're gonna be discharging. I only was given that information, I believe, today, that it was only gonna be limited to 100,000 gallons per day, but there was up to potentially almost 500,000, I believe, at one point. So I am not the expert on this, and we are not here, but we also we've been given this task of reviewing this information. We're trying to do it to the best of our ability. We have not been privy to the conversations and meetings that have happened between DEP and anybody. So is there any correspondence that potentially could be shared with us that would give us a little idea about the comments that DEP has made that have brought you to this point? Because I haven't seen any correspondence or review from DEP that might help also guide the commission. So, again,
The reports themselves are based on the guidance from DEP. So they're asking, go out, we want to see this model run like this, and we want to see what those results look like. So that report itself is what is the work product that DEP is requesting. So those lines they show you, that's what they want to see. They're sort of applying a standard today that has not been applied on the Cape, where they're saying it's really a tenth of an inch is presumptive. Anything over that, they have to review based on impact. Most of these in the past, I mean, they're it's a foot is what the mounding is in surrounding areas. So this is actually quite negligible for the amount that's going out there, and it's their abundance of caution, which we certainly understand, and that's really what we want. So they're presenting the most cautious moving forward, that then we can monitor, and if it looks good, then we have the potential to move to include more.
So
Or
is
if we
the-
find that there's a problem, then we have to back it off or adjust the way we're infiltrating. So this is really just to give us a baseline and a true understanding what's happening. So, we can run a lot of models, but it isn't the real world. We do our best, and Carolyn does her best to say this is what we think it's gonna do. But we actually need real world out there measuring these things so we can see it, we can manipulate the flow, we can manipulate where the beds go. We're gonna have a second site, we can manipulate it to another site, which is the plan based on what we're seeing over on this site. The reason really they dialed down is because it impacts that resource areas over in Dennis with vernal pools, and we have to see those dry out every few years, or they're not vernal pools, so that's one of the big limiting factors for us on the amount of water. It really isn't what's heading down underground to the bog. It's actually other resource areas that potentially could be negatively affected. So that's really what this monitoring is all about for us, is so we can see what's happening out there in the field and adjust to it. But until we're out there and we see it, we can run all the models in the world, but it's really a factor of seeing what's really happening out there and then adjusting what we're doing in relation to what's going on. We actually hope that we're gonna be able to get a lot more flow in the future, and that this is gonna help demonstrate what the effects actually are.
So is the 2 to 3 inches you're projecting, is that based on the 100,000 gallons?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the DEP has indicated to us that at this point that they will probably be approving a discharge value of between 500,000 gallons per day to 100,000 gallons per day. Our monitoring plan is predicated on the 100,000 gallons a day, but either way, regardless of which value they choose, the only area that's in the potential area of impact within Harwich is the active cranberry bog.
So that's what I wanted to get to. According to your map, it does show that you might have some bordering vegetated wetland associated with the stream coming out of the bog, if I'm reading your map correctly.
Can we put the map back up?
It is a swamp on the south end of that.
So it's both in
Wow.
Harwich and Dennis, and
Yeah.
where I want to go with the question is if it's going to raise groundwater levels, is it going to change buffer zones for any potential abutters, things like that? So there's a little, where the outlet
Oh,
is,
that little tiny area, yeah, okay, I apologize then, because I am not a wetlands scientist, you are correct. So then I will talk a little bit about what the BSC is going to be doing for their monitoring. So they have a monitoring cross-section where they will be looking at they will be going in and doing a transects along the different locations, and they will be looking at plant communities and documenting the plant communities. We are not expecting to see a change. This is a very, very small amount of water. The mounding is looking at, again, I said 90 days of basically 80% of the flow. So, it's pretty much close to maximum for most of the year, which it's summer and there's clearly much more traffic than there was in the winter. There's a lot more people here now. There's big fluctuations in water usage. So we're not going to see those big fluctuations. The biggest concern that I would have in terms of water rise in water levels is if you think about your really high April. So April, when you get a really wet April, maybe like in 2017, 18, their time period, there was a really wet year and there was a really dry year. Those really wet years with a little bit of mounding on top will be a couple inches. And so then we'd want to be monitoring that. And then if need be, because this is a very slow process, we would then be going around, and we've talked to the DEP about, then they would be modifying the operation of the system. And one of the ways that you can modify the operation of the system is this is the first of several sites. And so if during April, we know that we're concerned about a particular plant community, then we move the flow to a different location. So, for example, of the vernal pools that are within Dennis, we need to make sure that they dry out. The vernal pools that exist there, they only dry out every 2 to 3 years. So we're gonna be replicating that hydro period by making sure that they dry out every 2 to 3 years. And if for some reason it looks like they're not gonna dry out at the end of the summer, we'd be moving the flow to our secondary site for a time period. So if we started to see a concern about wetlands within those bordering vegetated wetlands, then we would be adjusting things. So right now, we have a bunch of transects. We're not expecting to see anything. Assuming we don't expect to see anything, then things travel along. If we start to see along one of those transects a concern where we think there's a change, then I would assume that we would be going out and doing some more investigation site-wide.
And so we have BSC on a multi-year contracted to monitor that for us specifically, that, and they've already done an plant inventory out there already, so that they'll know if they can monitor changes, so they're getting the baseline.
So I would just ask potentially that a monitoring station be included within that bordering vegetated wetland, potentially on the Harwich side, because I don't see any monitoring stations within that bordering vegetated wetland as notated on your plan. You have different monitoring locations, particularly with the vernal pools and other areas, but I don't see any monitoring other than the outlet of the cranberry bog. Within that bordering vegetated wetland, which the stream goes through, I don't see any proposed monitoring in there, and I think there should be one.
Okay,
At
would
least
you
one.
be okay with like just measuring the water levels downstream of the bog so that we get a sense of how much the water levels are varying in the bog?
I think I'd like to, this is my recommendation, and the commission will have to weigh in, and I'd like to see something similar to what you're doing in the other areas in terms of if there's any change in vegetative community as well.
Yep, so we'll have them do a transect just like they're doing on the
Yeah,
other side.
so,
I mean, that's why we're here.
Right,
We're
yep.
looking for those, and we want to make sure we're
Yep.
not impacting what is out there, so
sure,
abundance of caution is not a problem.
thank you. I have no further comments.
Okay, Commissioner Sophia.
I have no comments.
No, I really don't. It's a pretty interesting project. It's a whole lot of water, that's for sure.
There's gonna be a lot of water moving around. Clean water.
No, I appreciate all your efforts in coming before us tonight, but I don't have any specific comments at this point.
I don't have any additional comments.
The only thing I have is at what point you're basing the 2 to 3 inches on 100,000 gallons per day. At what point does it trigger shifting it over to another bed?
So right now, the trigger for shifting it to the whole nother site, so
Yeah.
there's 4 beds, but the whole nother site is, right now, if we get if you get the high water level conditions that continue into like September, and that pool, normally those pools would be drying out in September and October, and we're gonna be taking data to find out when they would actually be drying out. And if they don't dry out, then we send the flow over to Site 2 for a while until the water level drops, which will only take a week or so, would be my guess, just to make sure all the fish die.
Well, I'm a cranberry grower, and that little bit of water rise wouldn't affect me at all.
Every cranberry grower I've talked to has been excited, so if you want, let me know where the bogs are, we'll site something right next to it.
All set, yeah.
I have a few questions. My first question is simple. What's the real name of that river? I've heard 3
really.
names now.
Ah, yes.
Looking at Cape Cod Commission's map, it's Swan Pond River.
Yep,
I've heard Smelt
Smelt.
River.
Smelt Creek.
And
that's a new one, okay.
You.
Hideaway Creek is what I got the name of it. I was, yeah. So it's unclear to me exactly what the name is. It goes under several different ones. I've never heard Smelt Creek, so that's a new one. I'll add it to the list.
Yep, we've heard Hideaway Creek is what we've heard it most referred to as, but that's,
Brad can give you the history on Smelt Creek.
Yeah, it's a long story.
Okay, so the serious questions are, the thing, going through all this material, and it's not really responding to your request for what you're asking for, the water level fluctuation, but going through all your material, it strikes me that although in all of this, and in particular the comprehensive wastewater management plan, the effect of nutrients on freshwater ponds, i.e. phosphorus, is acknowledged, but there is absolutely no mention that I have found, I haven't read every word, but I've read a lot of them, of any treatment for phosphorus or any consideration of what the effect of pumping hundreds of thousands of gallons every day of water into a point, essentially, in the map, that presumably has all the phosphorus in it that it had when it came in, unless you're treating for phosphorus and you never mention it here. So I'm concerned about, and I don't know how much really potentially this is gonna affect Harwich, but it's still a question for me, is what happens when you're, instead of having this phosphorus source distributed all over town, you're focusing it on a single point. I'd love to hear some response to that question and some assurance that none of that phosphorus that I'm assuming you're pumping into the ground at really large volumes is gonna get into Harwich and cause us problems in Smelt Creek or in the cranberry bog. Maybe cranberry growers are happy to have more phosphorus coming into a cranberry bog if that's what happens.
We use low phosphorus fertilizers for a reason.
And this is mostly nitrogen removal.
I know,
So
I
that's
realize,
the combination of.
I realize
Yeah, so-
I realize that's the focus. We have a big problem on the Cape, as I'm
Right.
sure you're aware, with phosphorus in freshwater resources. So, and this is not addressed here at all, except to acknowledge that it's a problem, but no connection to this project. So let me just state my other question, which is, I'm also concerned, because I don't understand at all hydrogeology, but there are these nice little charts that you label as particle maps or particle
Yep.
motion maps, which
Yep.
I assume show the flow.
Mhm.
But how do you know, I mean, as you admit, those are models.
Right.
And you're testing for sort of static conditions, that is water level, but how do you know where those are going? And again, it's about the nutrients.
Right.
And if there's phosphorus in the nutrient load, is it all going into Swan Pond? And so, I mean, it's Harwich, we shouldn't be concerned, and it's a saltwater embayment anyway. But how do we know that some of that stuff isn't actually flowing into Harwich and causing Harwich problems?
So you asked me a groundwater question, so now I'm very happy. So in answer to your phosphorus, the waste treatment plants do remove phosphorus. I don't know what the limit is we could check. We do actually monitor for phosphorus. And generally what happens is the phosphorus levels are so low in the groundwater that after for a couple of years of monitoring for orthophosphate, they just say you don't have to bother because we know it's not there. So we can check for you on what the standard plants remove in terms of phosphorus, but they are removing phosphorus, which will address water quality issues. So,
It doesn't say that anywhere here, as far as I can
yeah,
tell.
because everybody's focusing on nitrogen, so they didn't think to stick that in
Almost
there.
everybody.
Right, so, but we can check on what that value is. In terms of the particle tracks, basically I always think of it as marbles rolling down a hill, right? If you go and you build a pile of, build a hill and then drop a marble down it, it's gonna roll one way. So there is a little bit sometimes of diffusion and dispersion, which is basically, when you open in middle school, think back to that, they opened the perfume bottle and then you raised your hand when you could smell it as the scent moved around the school, and you learned how particles diffuse. So there's a little bit about that, but mostly it's evection. So that basically means the water's flowing in one direction, all the particles that go with it are flowing in that direction. So just like they actually use this technique when they figure out the MEP watersheds that you all are using to determine, where the groundwater is coming from that's impacting your particular pond or your particular harbor that you're concerned about. That contributing area was defined in the same way with the particle tracks. And so basically it just flows downhill is what it's going. So we've got a mound, the water is actually flowing downhill towards Swan Pond. So we do know that it is actually indeed going that direction. And, yeah, hopefully that's, sorry.
So you're saying your model has already been confirmed in the field?
Yeah,
That is, you know by field observations that that is the way the water is flowing?
yes. We have several years' worth of water level data that's telling us which way the water's flowing. When we talked a little bit about not knowing exactly what's going on in the bog, it's just because one of the things we don't have is what the water level is in the bog. So whether it's going up or down, it actually doesn't, I know that it doesn't matter because I can do the different little tests in terms of which way the water flows at the site. It might matter a little bit about whether it surfaces right in the Hideaway Creek or Smelts Creek or Parker River, Swan Pond River, whatever that river is, or Swan Pond itself. But ultimately, it's all going to Swan Pond at this particular flow rate.
Does the direction of flow, does that depend on the actual groundwater level? That is, if you're raising the groundwater level by some amount, is that going to change the direction of flow?
It's not going to change the direction of flow. It's going to change unless you really start, if you were pumping, you could reverse the direction of flow and pull the water into a pump. But with the mounding, you're just going to push it more towards, and you might spread it out a little bit. But right now, the flow we're putting in is not really all that big, and so it's going straight towards Swan Pond.
So we have areas in Dennis that the sanitary private septic is actually causing higher mounding than we're talking about right now.
I mean, private
The
septic.
septics in the
Yeah.
neighborhoods, they're actually creating a higher mounding in areas of Dennis than we're talking.
Yeah.
That's how conservative
Yeah.
this is.
So, for example, some of your denser populated areas in Harwich that have septic systems, if all those people just suddenly disappeared, the water table would drop by several inches.
I see. Okay, I think I've
Sorry.
understood my.
Hopefully we've added rather than confused you, so. So, it's basically flowing downhill is the answer.
So, what you said, Amy, was, town of Harwich wants to get third-party review.
Well, the town, so, meaning, I have not been directed by the town administrator. If I've been given the okay, if the Conservation Commission wants a third-party review to seek, and that's why I was trying to be preemptive, but get a couple names together. But if the commission feels like you're comfortable without, I would, provided that we can add a sampling location in the bordering vegetated wetland within the bounds of Harwich, similar to what you're doing in the other locations in
Yep, so
terms of.
we'd do a monitoring transect.
Right,
In that, we could add that right to the plan.
yeah, so
That right with your order of conditions.
as long as the bog owner is comfortable with it, as long as they added a monitoring station there, I think I would be comfortable with it. I would let the town administration know if, whether or not the commission would like third-party review, but I'm feeling much more comfortable after the meeting tonight and with the addition of a monitoring station in the town of Harwich. Where I'm not gonna be recommending a third-party review at this time,
Okay.
but that is totally up to you.
I agree with that, what Amy says.
Okay. Anyone else care to chime in?
I agree the same.
Okay, is there any public comment from anyone in the room? Or anyone online? Is there anyone online?
There's no comment.
Excuse me?
There's no comment.
Okay, all right.
And while I won't put your bog owner on the spot, he is here in the audience, so if he had a comment, I would imagine he'd weigh in.
Okay. Anyone care to make a motion?
Hearing nobody else, I will attempt to make a motion. And please correct me if I pronounce things inaccurately. I will move that we approve the notice of intent for Theo Philos and
Theo Smith.
F. Smith Road in Dennis, map 55, parcel H3-11, subject to the addition of the monitoring request that was made at this meeting this evening.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much,
Thank
ladies and
you.
gentlemen.
Thank
Have a great evening.
Next on the agenda is a notice of intent for 19 Walther Road, map 121/3, parcel 9-4A-0, for reconstruction and improvement of a stone revetment.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Would we like to wait for Mark, or?
Oh, notice that you
He
left.
said he bit just out for a
Yeah,
second.
let's just
That's fine.
hold for a moment. Yes, thank you.
You guys have been going for a little while, so.
We have.
He didn't run away.
Okay, let's proceed.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Thank you, Commission. Dennis Moran with Ty and Bond, representing the Wiseman family for a project at 19 Walter Road. This project is to repair and/or replace an existing revetment that was constructed many years ago, to the best of our knowledge, in the 40s. That was severely damaged during the storm events over the past winter, the December and March storms that kind of did a lot of damage in your area. So the existing revetment is approximately 180 feet long. It's above mean high water, above the high tide line, about 35 or so linear feet away from the high water mark on the beach. It's a privately owned revetment that consists of granite stones that are mortared in place with a cementitious material, concrete. And then above that, so it's along the coastal bank, and there is natural vegetation growing. There's also currently an access path and a stairway leading to the privately owned beach. That stairway was also severely damaged. There's photos in the appendices of what is out there. What the Wiseman family and the applicant would like to do is repair that revetment, bring it up to elevation 12 to reduce and eliminate the erosion and the slope failure that they're having on site, replant and reestablish native vegetation in that area, and then construct stone stairways as part of the revetment down to the beach, consistent with the Harwich's bylaws or regulations. On the western side, we were planning to do a return 15 feet from the property line. On the eastern side, after some additional follow-up with Amy, I was corrected. I was under the impression there was existing revetment on the east side. There is not. So we would propose to bring that revetment 15 or so feet from the property line and taper it into a return to reduce the potential for scour in that location as well. So that's kind of a nutshell, no additional revetment where there was no revetment. All the work is outside of the high water mark or mean high water. There will be temporary impacts within the 0 to 50-foot buffer that will be then repaired and revegetated. That's for construction access and removal of the existing revetment, and then just repair and revegetating the area. So the work will be done on the beach as well. And the goal is to get this project done after the Labor Day rush, so that there's less people in the area. The applicant also would like to ask permission to install temporary stairs for the duration of the summer, just so they can provide access, because currently they do not have access to the beach. So that is the project. I'm happy to go into more details. Talk about the actual revetment cross-section and the stairs. And this, you have an idea of what we have going on. So.
Not too many questions. This is, as you said, it's a replacement of an existing, it's quite dilapidated and compromised. Lasted pretty long, given its age, but I think we just saw such erosion, it was probably almost covered up until this point. And got uncovered this year to some extent. So they're asking to replace in the same location, being a little bit reduced on the east end as it approaches the town property, in order to try to prevent as much as possible additional erosion onto town property. It'll be a little higher than what you see now. It's a pretty low wall, and it's hard to kind of tell because some of it has slumped over time. It's right now it was a mortared wall. This wall would be a rough face revetment, I believe.
Yes, this is an open rough face revetment with a gradation of stone to allow the wave action to dissipate, and also just a more natural environment for critters and whatnot. So yes, no mortared face.
No mortared face. Dennis and I spoke a little bit, or via email, about sand nourishment. In the past, the commission has conditioned that benchmarks be installed and that upon reveal of these benchmarks, that nourishment occur. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I do find that that nourishment probably is not happening on other properties that we've had that done on. Other towns do an annual nourishment requirement, and I did calculate the cubic yardage. It's only 22 cubic yards a year, so it's minimal.
A dump truck.
It's a dump truck. The hard part was how are we gonna necessarily get it here without disturbing the bank? And there's no town access nearby that you could easily put it on there, so, or to drive a truck down in order to do it. Benefit of an annual nourishment is we get notification, we would condition that there be proof of nourishment happening from the contractor, from the owner. But again, it is a little harder to probably coordinate, but if they were to have benchmarks, they would still need to find a way to coordinate to get sand there if benchmarks were installed. This section, I don't believe, has been nourished maybe ever, and it's eroding coastal, it would naturally be an eroding coastal bank where the coastal beach has significantly dropped because of lack of sediment, both from the large groin to the west and for not having done any sand nourishment, I don't believe, over the years here. So it would be to their benefit as well to do some sand nourishment to help protect their beach. How the commission wants to do it, either with benchmarks or with an annual requirement, is up to you. But with that, I would recommend approval. And a slight plan revision.
Looks like a pretty simple plan to me. I don't have any issues with it. of perhaps doing an annual, thing with some sand and build it up a little bit. Beach nourishment.
Okay.
No additional comments, Joe.
Same.
I have no remarks.
Sophia?
Nothing from me.
I don't either. I agree with Amy.
So is the consensus that you would like an annual nourishment, or would you like a benchmark installed that would be a trigger point?
I think it's simpler for the commission and for the department to just require an annual nourishment.
I agree
I'm just
with
going
that.
to turn around. Is that something that you're amendable?
one tiny thing?
That's, sorry, the
Mind
applicant.
coming up to
the applicant,
the
Vicky
microphone,
Wiseman,
that would be
sorry.
helpful. Where? Right here, the podium, or next to Dennis.
Thank
Hi.
you for, just to clarify about the nourishment,
Mm-hmm.
they've been, I don't know if I would call it nourishment, but they have put sand from the dredging projects for the past, I want to say several years. Last year particularly, there was a significant amount of sand dumped on
Okay.
the beach from the dredging project, so.
On your beach or on the town
Well,
abutting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
moves.
hard to, yeah,
Okay.
it's right there. So I would say a lot of sand was dumped on the beach last year. I don't
Okay.
know anything about cubic, whatever, but
Good.
a significant amount of sand was dropped on the beach. The beach is significantly higher than it's ever been in my whole lifetime, so.
Yeah, I know they did it at Neil Road Beach, and, yeah.
That is
yeah.
my beach.
Right.
My beach is the Neil Road Beach, so.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? There's no barrier, so.
Right,
The sand.
it moves.
So I just wanted to tell you that it has been nourished,
Okay.
but, not with nice sand.
Something
but-
that you could take advantage of is working with the harbor master to
To do that, have them do that.
formalize that going forward, yeah.
So would the commission be amendable to having a monitoring plan, and if required, additional material be brought in? Basically, an annual report that, for the transect on the beach versus just adding material, just because of the difficulties of getting material there. If the monitoring plan, I'm just saying it's showing no loss or an accumulation of material, deposition of sand, there's no need to bring in additional material, but
So, just looking at that beach, you're right next to town property that's to the east as well.
Correct.
And
both sides.
that property abuts a property with a sheet pile revetment with a return. And you can see, based on the darkening or not of the return sheet pile, that an enormous amount of material has left that place. Part of that, and that sheet pile was installed only a couple of years ago. I don't know whether that happened just this past winter or.
Well, that hole in the wall has been exposed this past winter, where you could tell where there was sand up until this winter because of the shading.
I don't think that sand went back out onto that beach. It's somewhere else.
It goes east.
Goes east. So I'm not, that's in conflict with your statement that the beach is higher than it's ever been. That's not what I observed just looking at that beach.
What-
And you probably have photographs there that, I forget whether there were photographs in your report that actually show that sheet pile return and the lower darkening where there clearly was a significant amount of material that is no longer there.
I would agree that the material is being removed and scoured in the direct vicinity of that sheet pile bulkhead, but I don't know if I can determine without actually taking annual monitoring of whether that material, like that's absolutely an isolated event of erosion on that beach. I'm not sure if the actual profile of the beach is changing over time. I'm not saying it isn't either way, I don't know either.
I used the CZM, granted, it's not perfect,
Yep.
but the 1970 to 2014 erosion rate transect, which they say is conservative, and got minus half a foot a year,
Okay,
plus or minus a margin of error. So you're slightly, it's according to the state, you are slightly decreasing every year.
probably, and I'm just looking at
But
the areas.
again, the town also
Town
does add
added
sand.
significant, it's because of the sand that they added last year, the sand is higher on the wall than it's ever been. I mean, I have photographs of the wall over the last 50 years.
Do you know how much sand the town puts on
Tons.
On each, I don't know.
each?
We have to be above mean high water, in theory. But yeah, a lot. I knew last year because we lost a lot of sand on that beach. I know the town put a lot of sand there last year. On the town, the town section.
Can we monitor it instead of having to add it every year? Is monitoring it difficult? I don't know what that process is.
Well,
I mean,
maybe not.
I would be happy to pay for
So-
monitoring.
You seem like a very willing property owner. There's a lot of property owners who say they're gonna do it and haven't necessarily followed through. So that's what we're dealing with, is I haven't seen great follow-through with others, on monitoring and adding sand when they're required to, so.
I don't know what the monitoring entails, like just measuring the height of the sand, or like?
It's usually installation of a benchmark or drill holes in the wall, and once those become exposed, probably one on each end of the wall, then a nourishment has to occur.
I like it because it's easy for everybody to point at it and say there's.
It's up to the commission. That's what we've done in the past. I'm letting you know it's not always successful, but.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if we want to, I think we want benchmarks either way. We want them installed. And I wonder if we ask for a certain frequency of nourishment and then see how it goes. I'm not sure annual is the greatest approach. I worry about property owners, including the town, that have overnourished below the mean high water mark and depositing material on aquatic resources. So that's a concern that I have. I've seen that happen. And so I don't know if annual is necessary. What makes you think annual is needed, Amy?
It's a best way of trying to mimic a natural process. Right now, there's a wall, there are walls that, and if not nourished at all, I mean, that coastal bank would naturally nourish a coastal beach and an intertidal area. This isn't an annual nourishment. When you put the sand on the wall itself or slightly above it, in as natural way as possible while having a wall, gradually takes the sand away, unless you get a big storm, then it takes everything. And then nourishes that beach as it would somewhat naturally do, versus having a wall, and then versus depriving it.
Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead.
I think with all the extra sand that's been deposited for the past, I mean, we can look up when it's been dredged, but the sand has been pulled out from the beach into the water, and so the water is it's extremely shallow, all the way to the end of the jetty that's there. That is new. That's relatively new over the last 10 years. So that sand is going into the water, and then it's just becoming now a sandbar. If that's what we want, then that's what's happening. That's what will happen.
So I think that situation is impactful and probably shouldn't be allowed, but it's very site-specific. Every stretch of the beach can respond differently. But, I mean, do we want to cover subtidal habitats that are diverse with sand? That's a concern.
So what Amy is saying is that without a revetment, without human interference, that dune or bank would continually deposit onto the beach, which then that presumably would also be washed into the near shore. And why is slow incremental movement of sand out into the near shore, why is that problematic? I understand that if you just dump, 100 yards of sand below mean high water, it would interfere with whether shellfish or other life are down there. But if it's a gradual migration those shellfish just adapt naturally?
It depends completely on how much you put and where you put it.
I think there's two different things happening here. One is the town may have been putting too much sand, and that may have been contributing to potential degradation. And that's something that I can address with the harbor master going forward. And then the conversation about the adjacent property here, what's the right way to monitor this, so.
And can you really go back in time to that situation? There were vetments, there were groins. You can't turn the clock back. So I don't know what the right thing to do. I think benchmarks are important. I'd like to see those here. And then maybe we can condition this to start off with 3 years of annual nourishment, see what happens. But are we talking about perpetuity? Annual nourishment?
Generally, that's what most other towns' commissions do.
Really?
Yep, annual in perpetuity.
Yeah, if you can keep it above mean high, and, you know, that's my concern. I've seen cases, and I don't know if it's inadvertent or what, where it's been deposited low on the beach, and it's impacting subtidal habitats. It's a case of where you put it and how much you put there.
And is the, and I know we just somewhat asked this, if the benchmarks aren't visible or a ongoing deposition through annual monitoring of fine sediment sand, would the applicant be required to add more material? Basically, if we go out there and look and it's like, oh, there's more sand here today than there was a year ago, we probably we don't need to add 22 cubic yards of material. And
That's something that we could consider. It does sound like the applicant who's physically present here tonight is, interested in this and wants to make sure it gets done right too. We don't always have that, so I might be amenable to just the benchmarks with a nourishment, benchmarks installed, and then when they're visible, in this particular case.
So,
Let
has
it
the
be
town
nourished.
habitually been putting sand on Neil Road Beach every year?
It's not every year, it's when they dredge Saquatucket or Witchmere and they have enough spoils to put on Neil Road Beach. I don't believe it's every year, I can't say which frequency.
it's frequent.
Pretty
when they-
frequent.
It's frequent.
But not annual.
I mean, it's a big process because it's a huge pipe that comes over the,
Right.
it was a lot of sand last year.
If the town's not gonna be dredging and pumping, the method would be to bring it in from the upland on your own. Is that how?
Probably with a chute, yeah.
Yeah. And other
So-
towns are requiring that?
Yes.
Wow.
Or driving it over the beach, using a town parking lot to drive it in. It's been happening a long time for other towns. So maybe this is a bigger conversation that the commission should have about nourishment requirements. I don't want to penalize this property owner and have a new process. So maybe it's something that we should talk about at another time during discussion for the commission and stick with our standard practice for now.
Which would be requiring benchmarks
Benchmarks installed
and annual.
with an as-built plan for the rock wall, and then an annual inspection of the wall, and if the benchmarks are visible, then nourishment has to occur.
Who is responsible for the annual inspection?
That will be between the owner and if they would want to hire somebody to do an annual inspection.
So we need a report with photographs.
Generally, that's what we've been asking folks. It's a
Yeah,
very
happy to do that.
very basic report, annual report.
And we would need the as-built for the COC anyways.
Right, but
So,
not all the, people don't always ask for a COC right after completion of a project, so.
they should.
We'll usually condition that, probably within a few months for this one. Okay, so annual monitoring and benchmarks, one on each end.
Did we
Yeah.
discuss how the benchmarks would be selected?
Would you have a suggestion?
I don't. I think it's a pretty important elevation to pick.
It's usually the existing beach elevation at time of installation. They have to put the beach back to the elevation that it was pre-construction. That's what it's been. We've done in the past is beach elevation.
Any time of year considerations, or just whenever they're doing it?
I would suggest the monitoring be done in late winter. That way, if nourishment needs to happen, it can be in spring. Ideally before April 1, because we do tend to potentially have shorebirds in the area, according to the state. So I'll say annual monitoring by March 1st, annually. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, further discussion? Did I already ask for public comment? Well, I don't hear any public comment. Someone could make a motion.
Hearing no public comment, I will try to make a motion. I move that we approve the notice of intent for 19 Walter Road, map 121/3, parcel A, parcel 9-4A-0, under the condition that benchmarks be installed, that there be annual monitoring of the beach prior to March 1st of every year, and that if the benchmarks are visible in that monitoring, beach nourishment will be required.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I just have one question that I brought up and I forgot to ask. The temporary stairs so they can access it?
Oh. I would like an architectural sketch or something of them, because we just need to make sure that they're safe, and I'm not sure if it's something that the building commissioner is gonna need to weigh in on.
We can do that.
Okay, do we have to come back to you first?
Just, you're gonna, I would say, can it be approved under this permit so long as the building commissioner and myself are okay with?
So have someone draw a plan and then,
Yeah.
and then.
It can be a sketch plan, we just.
Do I have to get then a building permit or just that you just want to look at it?
You'll have to contact the building department to see how they want to handle it. In the past, coastal access stairs haven't gotten full building permits because there's really not a way for them to meet full code, and this is temporary. He's going to want to make sure it's safe,
Okay,
so
great,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
he'll determine. I don't think he's going to require a full permit. Okay?
Thanks very much.
Have a great evening. Have a good 4th of July.
Thanks, you too.
Enjoy your meeting on the 3rd.
You sure you don't want to come?
I live in New Hampshire, so I do not want to come for a night meeting on the 3rd.
Oh. Okay, next, we have a notice of intent for 35 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel F1-0, for the installation of a permanent dock.
Amy, need green cards?
I'll take them.
I'll send them to you, too.
Yes, I saw. Email is actually perfect. I don't need those. Thank you. I don't need any more paper in my file.
Good to know.
Either way, are they just taking these now?
We usually just take the actual thicker green cards normally, but I do prefer electronic, so
Okay.
thanks.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Wayne Tavares. I'm a registered landscape architect, a professional wetland scientist, and a construction supervisor. Kim Anachirian has had a dock since 1961. Well, not her, but the property has had a dock since 1961. It has been temporary. We'd like to make it permanent. We have met with Amy and the harbor master, John Rendon, about this. Rendon, I have to meet next week again. They had some suggestions and some criteria for this permanent dock, so we have followed those. We have shortened the dock, and on the plan, do you have the plan? Amy, do you have the plan? You want me
No, you didn't ask to have it available electronically, so I didn't, but they all have them. They all have the
Okay,
plans.
you all have the plans?
Yep.
Okay. So, I shadowed or ghosted the old location of the plan, the one that was approved in 1961, licensed as well, and we have old cross-sections of that plan. We have shortened it by some 16 to 17 feet. We have straightened it rather than the original way that it was placed on the lot and surveyed in 1964. This is a certified land-courted piece of land. The project is really twofold. I don't want to get away from the major part of this project. I'm sure everybody behind me is anxious to hear about that portion. But we're trying to improve and bring to standards what the dock is. The dock is substandard, it's old, it's due, like a lot of people have been before you, before, to revitalize it, renovate it, redevelop it is the right, correct word. We've provided for public access under the deck. We don't need stairs that go up to the deck. We want to redo the stairs that lead to the deck as well. They are also substandard, also old. So the docks goes out now some 64.9 feet beyond the existing portion that shows, that remains. It reaches 5 feet in depth. We had talked again with Amy and John about getting to the right depth. We understand that there's a challenge as far as navigation is concerned. John asked me to go back with a surveyor, we have a certified surveyor, professional land surveyor who did the reconnaissance plan. We have an engineer who also stamped the plan of the dock that I had designed. We've also placed a pipe out there so everyone can see where the end of the dock is. It's not very deep. It's in an area of just before moorings. There's one mooring that we sort of step on the way out. John said not to worry about it. It could be relocated. We just want enough distance between the moorings and the end of the dock. So we present this as the water-dependent part of this plan. There's also a non-water dependent part of this plan, where in improving this, and I've heard you in 3 different episodes tonight talking about nothing in the 50-foot area unless we have mitigation. So I was warned properly of that. So we have an area on the coastal bank that has Rosa rugosa, has summer grape, has Japanese knotweed. So we're hoping that the mitigation of an attempt to remove all this and replant it, we have a replanting list that after 3 years, we're hoping to beat the knotweed. Summer grape is a nuisance, but it really doesn't enhance the coastal bank, and it's not really a permanent type of a native planting. The Rosa rugosa, of course, is on the fence. It has 7 of the criteria that makes it invasive. I like Rosa rugosa. I've talked to a lot of other towns that if Rosa rugosa survived on a property, that we would not remove it, but we wouldn't enhance it. In this particular case, we'll remove it totally. What we're trying to do in there is create a perch, a small perch, and an entry to the stairway. It takes up 146 square feet of additional space. It's not subject to the tides. It's right on top of the bulkhead. And it's just, you can see the mean and low water is just below the bulkhead. So we're perching this perch. They just want to sit and be able to look out on their area. They wanted to add it to the dock, and I told them that criteria for docks are usually not much more than 4 feet wide. So there's no way to put a bench system on this dock and create it. So we're trying to do this little 146 square feet area of coverage within your 50-foot zone, and at the same time replace that with 2,635 square feet of mitigation. It's a considerable change. It's more than 10-to-1 change we're willing to do. And we heard earlier about how to manage the program. This has to be done under a management program. So we do the cut and swipe method again. My method, which I've had good success with, is more cutting. And then, of course, the herbicide swipe in September, when the rhizomes of the knotweed take up the poison and tend to kill it better than any other time of the year. So we would cut it starting in June, July, August, September, 4 cuttings, get rid of the material. You're weakening the plant when you do that. You're not enhancing the plant. And then the last cutting, we would do the cut and swipe. We have a replacement plan of plants that would cover that entire area once we thought we were successful getting rid of the knotweed, and the Rosa rugosa would not be planted back again. We can pick any of these plants that are off the list to use around that new perch. So basically, I know the thrust of this project is water dependent. It is a dock. It's designed, the other thing that John and Amy and I talked about was using these monopiles. So it's a good suggestion. The new technology today widens the span of the dock as it goes into Witchmere Harbor. So there's fewer holes to poke, so to speak. And with the monolithic piles, even fewer. So we have 4 monolithic piles between 2 set piles at the end of the fixed portion of the dock. And then we have a ramp, an aluminum ramp, that leads to a 10 by 20 float at the very end. We've designed the float with bladders, no styrofoam. The ramp is necessary to go with the ties. It's a 3-point, it's interesting because the old survey had a 3.6 swing in the ties, low to mean. And the new survey had 3.7, so they're right on the money. Again, John and I have to go over this plan with his Waterways Committee next week. Amy sort of warned me off, but I'm trying to take care of things that we can sort of sweep tonight under this. John will have other recommendations that we'll be happy to pass on. But right now, that deck dock is designed correctly. It's in the right place. It gains 18 feet from the old dock. It's in the right direction. It goes to the left of the old dock's direction. Also, we provided, I think a little late for your submission, Amy, but we provided 2 plans. I can pass this one around. This is a plan for the distance the new dock would have in relation to the distance before. And I apologize for this. I provided the old dock in. So this here, if we can pass it around, it shows that the new dock is 5 feet closer than the span across the entry to Witchmere Harbor, which is 152. So it's 147. There's a 5-foot differential only in that separation. Plus, you have the mooring fields. These are actually going to be channel markers when this is built. You're going to come in, you're going to go the same way. The navigation is exactly the same as before. The input that Amy and John had was excellent. To make it permanent, yes, every other dock in Witchmere Harbor is permanent. They should have permanent rights to it. It sits in the right location. It's in addition to the harbor, not just to the owner. It's a complete plan. If you have any questions, I'm trying to keep the meeting short. It's late at night and past my bedtime. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
As Mr. Tavares said, this has to go in front of the Waterways Committee. It's going in front of the Waterways Committee on the 26th.
26th, next Wednesday.
So we won't be voting on this tonight. We'll be waiting to hear about their review of the project. there was a historic dock in this location, and there was a permanent section, which is still out there now, and then the rest of the section, which you can see the extent of which on your site plan, was installed seasonally. And it is proposed to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more tucked in, more straight in line with the shoreline. The existing portion of the dock that's there is very low in profile, closer to the marsh. This would be brought up to our current standards of docks and piers.
I forgot to mention that, thank you.
And in terms of spacing and height above, there's a little fringe marsh, especially to the northwest. Visited the site at low tide, and the site, it's pretty degraded area in some of the locations there. You get some sand, but you do get some mucky areas, also a lot of trash. At low tide, we picked out some pretty old bottles, actually. In terms of, so I'll defer to Natural Resources and Harbor in terms of navigation, but John and Wayne and I looked at this together, and at that meeting, John didn't foresee a big navigational hazard. Here, it seems to be a little bit better, but we'll let him talk at his next meeting. The new perch that you have there, it's a new deck right at the top?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted clarification about what a perch was.
Okay.
So it's
Perch
a
is
deck.
a raised deck, and I've used the name for years and years because it's a perch just to sit above. It's behind the bulkhead, by the way, so there's also a constructed unit in front of it, which should help in passing this through. If I did it right on the coastal bank, which is laid bare and has no structure on it, then I would understand the interference with it. But it's over to the right. It's a little perch to sit and not use the dock and just look out at Witchmere Harbor. And I have a little entryway that comes onto the lawn, and serves as an entryway in. And that's something that's not that important. But it helps to get onto the stairway and also onto the perch, and that's why it was designed that way. Sorry. Thank you.
So I didn't see it, and I may have missed it in your narrative, but technically you should be requesting a variance from our 50-foot no disturb zone
Yes.
bylaw, so that page 1 of your letter can easily be, a sentence could be added there.
Okay.
But I would recommend that.
Is it a variance or a waiver?
It's a variance. It's a variance from our bylaw. We have a 50-foot no disturb zone prohibiting new structures, unless a variance is granted. And a variance typically, as you heard earlier today, is hard to come by. And it's really about hardship, or if the mitigation proposed greatly outweighs any detriment. So you are proposing to basically remove the invasive material on the bank. It is fairly substantial with, in terms of, it is vastly more invasive than it is native. I do have a few comments about switching out a few of your proposed plants that I'm a little unsure how they're gonna deal with some of the salt, but that's a conversation that we can have if you want, later. Basically the birch, the clethra, the inkberry, and the winterberry. I just wonder how they're gonna do with some of the salt air there. Yeah, I have no other comments, I don't think, at this time.
Thank you.
I don't have anything.
Start with you, Wayne.
No comment.
I have no additional comments, Joe.
Yeah, so I guess on the planting plan, it looks like a bunch of shrubs, 4 to 5 feet on center. That's what's proposed. And the detail's a little bit low, so I'd like to see more detail. I'm concerned about, how it's gonna look. Is it going to be a real natural buffer as opposed to a landscape look? on the beach there. And I guess I want to clarify the need to mitigate. What would be mitigated for with this project?
They're mitigating for the addition, for the deck, what they're calling a perch at the
perch.
top of the bank.
Right. And so they're proposing this vegetation removal as the mitigation. Is that correct?
Exactly right, yeah. The removal of the invasives and the addition of the plants.
Right. So for me, and this is just one commissioner, I view that as a landscaping preference at that location that the property owner would probably want to do anyways. So I don't really view that as mitigation for that new structure. Giving up some of the lawn would be possible mitigation. There's a lot of lawn along that beach, but we don't have a consensus on this topic. I just don't view, in cases where the property owner would want to do that anyways as a landscaping preference, I don't view that as mitigation for a new structure in the 0 to 50. So that's my concern. I don't really see issues with the dock. Yeah, just more detail to your planting plan. You have to come back to us, and consideration for some, what I would view as true mitigation at that spot.
Apologies too, I usually have notes under here and I forgot about them. But I usually group these in 3s and 5s, so that group mass planting. Amy's removing probably 4 of the species out of here, so it makes it more.
Might add a few different ones.
Okay, exchange.
Yes.
Exchange, okay. So then we can come up with a better list, but do you want specified locations of where they are? Is that what
What's
you're saying?
happened a few times with these coastal bank projects is we endeavor to have a nice natural buffer, and it comes out overly landscaped. And so I would like to see a real natural buffer at that location. And even then, I'm not convinced myself that it's mitigation for that new structure. So maybe consider with the property owner if there's any other things you could offer, such as taking out a strip of that lawn with additional plantings put in its place.
Okay, good idea.
That's something I can talk to you about, and I can give you an example of a plan that a sketch plan that might be amenable.
Very good.
I have no remarks.
Sophia?
I also would like to see a little bit less lawn in the area. I overlooked the perch, and I think that would be preferable for me. The only other comment is I didn't see that was native grape in the buffer. It's Ampelopsis, it's porcelain berry, which does have a very similar leaf, so that would be something that you'd want to get rid of during
Either way, that's very invasive, yeah.
Yes, it is
So
indeed, it's real.
I'm not sure if you're right on that, but that's okay.
All right,
I'll
fair.
take your play.
Okay. That's all.
Okay.
So, 2 things. One is, the scale on this whole thing is small, and it's a little hard to see what's going on, but it appears to me that what is identified as the new perch here is actually not in the 50, it's on the bank. It's in the resource.
Oh, you're right, so technically it doesn't need a variance, but it does need more mitigation. You're right.
Right. Do you agree, it's on the bank?
It
It's
is.
not- It's, the.
I agree with you.
The landward edge of the new perch is right on,
According to your,
Yeah,
according to
according
your
to.
plan, yeah, it's on the,
I didn't talk
it's
to
in
the
the
surveyor.
resource.
Think about that bulkhead. That bulkhead, if it intercepts the coastal bank, then it scoots down the side and to the, okay, I'll have to rectify that. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I did it.
and unless I'm misreading this plan, there's a more serious problem here, which is that you don't have 3 feet around the float. Mean low water is at -2.3, and the deepest it gets is just -5, so
Oh.
there isn't 3 feet anywhere. So I don't.
Good catch.
You can't do this.
I'm sorry.
You could not approve this.
I'm sorry, I'm missing.
So you have mean low at a -2.3.
Yes.
Around your float is -5 at,
Not even,
So
excuse
you-
me, so at the end of the float is -5.
Right.
The rest of it is less. So it's even less I mean, at the end of the float, it's like 2 point,
We need 3 feet of water around all sides of the float at mean low.
At mean low. So subtracting that 3.6 that I mentioned earlier from 5 only gives you, oh, no, that's the full swing, I'm sorry. Subtracting the 1.4 from 5 is 3 point,
Where are you getting 1.4?
okay, that's mean high. Hang on a second.
2.3.
2.3 from 5 is 2.7.
So you need a little bit more depth.
I need a little bit more depth, so it has to go out further.
well,
Right.
you need more than a little bit more depth, because you need 3 feet around the entire.
Around the whole deck,
float.
yeah. Wow,
So, I don't,
okay.
I mean, it was a nice idea that it was sold in 16 feet.
Yeah, no, that was a good catch.
Why?
That's
We're gonna
coming-
approach
oh, it's
the-
coming in?
The flow is proposed to come in, but it's gonna have to
Mean low
go out.
water is minus 2.3,
I
at the
didn't
very
catch
end,
that.
it's minus 5, that's less than 3 feet below mean low water. You need 3,
Huh. Yeah, I didn't get that in my packet, so I didn't see it.
In other words, the back of the float has to be beyond contour 5.
The entirety of the float
The entirety of the float has to be somewhere
at 5.3.
5.3, right?
There's been a big vote on that in recent years. Could there be, there's been a large vote on that float in recent years.
Well, that float's farther, the current float is farther out than this is proposed.
Coming in, yeah, okay.
So, an associated question is, why do you have the float oriented parallel with the pier as opposed to at right
T,
angle?
you
Why
mean a
don't-
T?
Wouldn't it'd be easier to get your 3 feet if you had it as a T?
We
Is
can
there a
do that.
particular reason why you have it that way?
It's the old way that it was designed. We kept the same pattern of it from the old plan that was here and just followed it. So that's why we did it. We're trying to reach it in such a way that we'd be able to keep boats on the side rather than on the end. Now it has to go on the end, which is more intrusive. So,
Yeah.
so we'll be at, thank you for picking that up. We're basically back out to where we were at 80.5 feet, somewhere in that area. But the angle is better than it was originally. So, and we'll turn it to a T. The permanent part will have to be longer.
Right.
So, and I apologies here, it's been a long night and all that. I brought this up, Amy sort of waved me off, but I thought we'd vet some issues, and we are vetting issues here, so I appreciate the time.
Okay, so we need.
We would need a continuance. Our next available is July 3rd. We would need all revisions a week prior. So the night of your meeting with
John,
conversely, I don't know if they're gonna have any changes as well. So our meeting after that is July 17th. Which meeting would you like?
I think the July 17th is gonna give me more time. Excuse me for a second. I may be away. Let me just check. I may have to take the first one, sorry. No, I'm not going to that event, no. Fine.
17th?
17th's good, yeah.
Okay. I will move that we continue.
Excuse me, may we hear from the audience? I think they're here too, sorry.
Yes, we may, we should, thank you.
Yep.
Any comments from the public? Oh, okay. Anybody online? Okay.
Okay. Hearing no further comments, I will make a motion that we continue the public hearing for the letter of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 35 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel F1-0, to our meeting of July 17th, 2024.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Thank you so much,
6 and
appreciate it.
9. Thank you. Okay, all right. Moving along. Next, we have a notice of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U4-32, to remove an existing house, parking and septic system, construct a new house, parking and septic system, invasive plant management, and mitigation plantings.
Good evening.
Can you hold for a moment?
Yeah. A lot of different stuff tonight.
Well, I guess we're having a break for.
And they all got revised, right? Yeah. Great, thanks.
You have to hang for a minute still.
You want to say a few things too, right? Yeah, after you. Is that and then Katrine? Is that good? Introducing yes, the other day. We should let them know that Jack's here. Yeah. And there you go. It's true. It's interesting that Dennis, leach fields. I was gonna say the same thing. None of you are, where's all the water coming from? They're gonna pump it out of the river and into the? No, those are
It's a septic
sanitary.
treatment plant.
Yeah,
Septic
but where do they get all
Sewers.
those, where does the water come? They're gonna pump in.
from the houses.
They're gonna have to hook up the houses to sewers.
Into sewers, all the sewer lines are gonna run to this plant. And some of the effluent will be, is supposed to be discharged right next to Harwich.
Harwich has gotta be doing its own, so, too, you know? We gotta, this town has to.
I mean, I still have hope that there could be some sort of a partnership with
With
Dennis and Yarmouth.
and-
Okay, we can proceed now. please.
Great. Dan Croto from Moran Engineering, here with Katrine Higgins from Wilkinson Ecological Design, and also Deborah and Mark Ellis, the homeowners, are here, and the contractor, Jack Roby, who's responsible for doing the project, who's also the neighbor straight across the street, so he's well aware of the neighborhood. The existing house, the site, the plans we gave were the site plan that has existing conditions below the proposed conditions on that one sheet. And then the Wilkinson Ecological Design Mitigation Plan. And we also gave us a plan with two sides showing the elevations of the proposed new house. I think the majority of it's single floor, and then there's a garage, and over the garage is, and that side is 2 floors. We did go to the Board of Health for the septic. The existing building had a septic variance because it's a fairly good-sized lot, but the majority, or half of it, is marsh. And then the coastal bank is in most places, is the limit of the 100-year floodplain, which is a velocity zone, elevation 13. The existing house is a 1954 house. The owners were originally looking at rehabbing that and trying to add a garage on front, but to meet the new building code, and the foundation was just in poor shape, so that became not the way to go. So the existing versus proposed has a slight reduction in the 0 to 50. The house is slightly further away from the coastal bank. Again, the coastal bank is a floodplain limit in most cases, and then it's a landscaped area, and then it goes down to will be more like with the naked eye, you would say it was a lower coastal bank, which is which would handle the majority of all floods, including what came on this winter. So there is an increase proposed between the house and the road within the 50 to 100-foot setback, and there is a chart on the plan showing those numbers. So it comes out to an increase of 756 square feet between the 50 to 100. And that's where Katrine's plan is here to meet the regulation on mitigation. So there's a couple of positives with it, is the Katrine's plan, and then also as part of the Board of Health approval, and as part of mitigation for conservation, we're proposing a nitrogen treatment septic unit and a pressure dose septic field. So a large improvement in the sanitary septic treatment for the property. And so with that, I'll just, Mark, the owner, who's been heavily involved in the property and this project, of course, just wanted to say a few words.
Well, and my wife too. So both of us, we've lived in this house for 5 years now. We realize how lucky we are to be so close to the water. We absolutely love it. We would like to retire here, but the house is very much a summer house. And so we wanted to be able to put a garage on the property in order to be able to live there year round and put the cars in and everything else. And so that's really the reason for us wanting to go ahead with this project. And Dan, our architect, have worked with us really carefully to make sure that we've been able to position that garage in a place which would be acceptable under the code, and have actually twisted the house to allow us to actually reduce the amount within the 50-foot barrier. So that's really all I think we have to say.
Okay. Good evening, Katrine Higgins for the record, from Wilkinson. So our work before you tonight proposes about 1,800 square feet of ecological restoration to serve as mitigation for the proposed house reconstruction that Dan described. And it's also, from from our perspective at Wilkinson, we've been already working on this property since 2021 on ecological restoration just seaward of this. So we feel this is a great opportunity to expand our work in this resource area. So our proposed mitigation, really when you look at the mitigation on our plan, there's two distinct pieces to the mitigation. First, we're proposing invasive removal on about 1,000 square feet. I think it's 1,100 square feet. And that's more on the sloped area in the middle, shown on our plan in green. And that area currently includes invasives and non-native species such as rugosa rose, a juniper hedge, Asiatic bittersweet, privet, and vine honeysuckle, tons of vine honeysuckle. And if you really look in and see what's growing there, the vine honeysuckle is almost acting as a ground cover through the area. So it'd be great to get rid of that. There's a large beach plum along the edge of the lawn in that area, and we would of course save that, and we're proposing to regeneratively prune that to improve its health. It's large, but it needs a little regeneration of pruning to kind of get it back and fruiting more and producing more fruit in the fall. So in addition to the invasive removal, the second area of mitigation that I was talking about is lawn removal. So we just resubmitted a plan, and I apologize for the late getting you this hot off the press, but we've identified another area, and you can see on our plan that I just passed out along the southwestern property line. There's kind of a green triangle of a new area of lawn removal. Originally, we were proposing about 370 square feet of lawn removal. Now we're talking about 770 square feet of lawn removal with that new area. So the lawn, it's really focused on the existing lawn all along that fence. So that would be besides the access way to the existing boardwalk. But so we would transition that area into a native grass plant community to provide enhanced habitat for wildlife and really a lot of stormwater infiltration in that area, and then plant some additional shrubs too, like the arrowwood. So once the invasive plants are removed, like we always do, we would immediately seed the area with a native seed mix. We would blanket the sloping area to provide immediate stability. And then we would like to plant the native plants as our plan shows, the black chokeberry, arrowwood, Carolina rose, bayberry, and beach plum. So as I mentioned from the start, we've already worked on this property doing invasive removal and restoration planting. We're looking at adding to that, spanning over an additional 1,800 square feet. And within that mitigation of 1,800 square feet, 42% of that proposed mitigation is lawn removal. And I think that's important to point out to you, your commission. And this is really in an effort to create a more robust resource area and an ecological uplift for Saquatucket Harbor. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Amy.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my comments to heart there, and further reducing some lawn area. So as they said, they're looking to do some reduction in the 0 to 50 and some addition in the 50 to 100, and mostly in terms of a garage, it seems. That's where a lot of your additional square footage is coming from. And as to offset that, there's a couple different ways that they're proposing to mitigate. One is introduction of an IA septic component to their septic system, which will help reduce nitrogen to a nitrogen-sensitive area, and take out some invasives, put in and non-natives, and put in some natives, as well as some lawn reduction. So it's kind of a multi-pronged way of mitigating. I don't have one question I have is the hedge that's at the very top of the bank that kind of spans the entire back. That's not juniper, I don't believe.
You don't? Oh.
So there's clumps of juniper on either side of the path, but right along the top of the bank, I don't know, Sophia, if you remember what it was there. It wasn't juniper that I remembered. I think it was just an ornamental hedge. I would be in favor of leaving the juniper where there are junipers, but if there's non-natives in that hedge, because I think right at the top of the bank, or right against the lawn
Very thick bush.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
We're-
thing about that hedge, I was gonna say something. We're viewed by everybody that goes in and out of that harbour. That hedge,
Yeah.
as it is, acts as a privacy for us.
Yeah.
If you take that away, everybody in the harbour is just gonna be looking at us.
Oh, I'm not
and
saying
the
take it
house.
away and not put anything back. I'd say
Yeah.
take it away and put something more native back potentially. That could still be a hedge. I would take a look at what that is. That's a minor thing from, it's not gonna sway me one way or the other, but just, if you're looking at naturalizing that slope, I think you might find, that that's really like the only one that would be left that would be a non-native. But just something to look at. The junipers on either side of the current access path are native, and even though they're large and it's kind of just them, they are providing some benefit and habitat there. I would just suggest that you say mowing of the old kind of path area twice annually. I would encourage just once if possibly in the, to keep the woody, and that'll be enough to keep woody vegetation out, and that way you're not impacting any wildlife that might be in there, and you're doing it in the late fall is when we do our mowing, traditionally for creation of more of a, this type of habitat. So other than that, I really don't have any other questions. I think my only, something I can follow up with you on the other side, on the back side is talking about the status of the replanting, because when we did go out there, I'm not sure if everything's taking right at the upper marsh area, kind of at the toe of the slope in the upper marsh area. It looks a little bit sparse compared to what I think the plan had shown, and I'm just not sure if, I'm sure it's not for lack of trying.
I just want to say, I had the same conversation with Katrine. I'm like, there should be, but she tells me it's all gonna.
I'm sure it will, yeah, it's just, I know it's not for lack of trying, and I know you're still in the process, but that's just something I noticed there too.
The high salt water, we planted it last fall, and then the timing of it with the tides, I think, impacted the health, but we'll
You're on
continue to
it.
monitor it.
Okay.
And replace as needed.
With your changes that you've proposed now in front of us tonight, I can recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Sophia?
A couple questions. The second set of stairs, are those staying, the ones closer to the water? Yeah. Why, like, are they, because if that's gonna be meadow, is there still gonna be a path there? I'm just curious what that's gonna read like.
I don't think there'd be a defined path. I mean, people might still walk through there. We just were thinking the impact of removing the stairs and stability and stuff, and just kind of leave them there and let them
I mean,
be.
it's tiered to some degree.
Yeah.
And so I think it would actually be hard. So, like, there's two of us and we have two kids. We're not, but it is nice to walk down there. But if it's like this and you're walking through, it's fine. But I think there is some logic to needing to be able to walk down.
Okay, I'm just trying to get an idea of what it's gonna, how it's gonna function.
I think it's going to look really nice.
I'm sure it will. Are there any trees being taken down, like, close to the house, anywhere around for construction?
Between the house and the road, there'll be trees taken down for the,
It's actually good because we twisted the house. I was really worried about this. Because we twisted it, there are two really nice trees there on the coastal side that we're going to be able to keep. And Jack tells me that the way they do the foundation, they're going to be able to make sure that they're maintained. So we're actually really happy, because if that house wasn't twisted, I think it would be actually difficult to retain it.
Right now, we don't have air conditioning in the house, and so those trees have been really wonderful in just keeping us cooler.
And the viburnum going in that little corner, is that where the sassafras is? I'm trying to remember when we were
Yes,
there.
it is.
It is.
Yeah. It's a little bit more protected than,
Are you picturing the viburnum joining the sassafras? Or, like, I think it's a really nice little stand of it is my only thought. So I wonder if, like, I would hope that maybe both could thrive. So I don't know if kind of like scooting them back a little bit so the sassafras can stay. I don't know. It's just-
Yeah, and I think the sassafras is on the other side of the fence.
Okay,
too.
all right.
So, yeah, we would definitely keep that sassafras. And actually, on the previous plan, it calls that out as to remain.
I mean, I think overall it looks good. I think because it is a mixed bed right now, it's not 100% invasives, and I do think that, I'm not sure, I didn't notice a difference between those 3 evergreens. There might be the long hedge at the top and then the 2 areas on either side of the steps.
the long
didn't
hedge on the
register
top,
for
I
me.
think is different than the sides. But I don't know what it is.
I didn't notice. I mean, they do, stuff that's thick like that is nice habitat, but if you have a lot of it elsewhere, then I could see, maybe changing that out to something that's native. But I think my only point would be that because it's a mix of native and non-native in that existing vegetation, that I might want to see a little bit more, lawn disappear, to make it feel more like mitigation. But that's me being a little bit nitpicky, and overall it looks good, so.
I have nothing.
So I have a few, and don't call yourself nitpicky. I think, I feel that that's not mitigation for this, that type of invasive plant removal. You heard me say it before, I don't have to go into great detail, but I don't view that as mitigation for this type of alteration in the 50 to 100. To me, it's really a landscaping preference, so I would like to see more lawn removed, as Sophia mentioned. Probably more important would be to see if we could remove a little more of the house in the 0 to 50. It's only coming out 3 feet with a reduction of 82 square feet, which is really a pretty small reduction. It's a tear-down rebuild. We look for opportunities to try to reduce that footprint and that encroachment in the 0 to 50. So is there something that can be done to reduce the square footage in the 0 to 50 that can be applied as mitigation? I think that would be important. I don't know if your setbacks make that difficult.
With this house, it couldn't be done because of the septics. We're still on septic systems here. In the septic setbacks of the lot line, the house it's as far forward as possible. And even we go, when we get the CONSCOM approval, at the point, then we can file for zoning board of appeals, because the existing house and this house do not meet the full setback to that north lot line. But we are meeting the setback. So we have the road, then we have a 10-foot setback to the septic, and then we have the 20 feet to the house. So with this, it's as far forward as possible. I think listening to Katrine, it sounds like she has a 1-to-1 with lawn removal and the increase in the 50 to 100, and then far more than a 1-to-1 with changing over to native plants. And then we also have the IA septic, the nitrogen reducing septic on top of that, not increasing bedrooms, keeping the same 4 bedrooms existing, 4 bedrooms proposed. So I think there is quite a bit of mitigation. But as for what benefit those existing non-native plants have to switching those to natives, I would think there would be a good benefit with wildlife. But that's more, obviously, Katrine's expertise.
No, it's certainly an argument we've heard many times, and I just don't support it in this case. I think we're all looking for ways to improve that buffer, reduce encroachment, and have better wildlife habitat. And so, to me, there's not a lot of gains to just that. It's disappointing that we can't find a way to reduce that footprint, the 0 to 50, 82 square feet is minimal. I look at the property to the north, 31 mil, and really disappointing how little ecological gains were made to that property. We talked a lot about invasive plants, just not a lot of gains, you know, and so it's an opportunity to do something special, I think.
Well, our project's not done there, so.
It's not?
No,
Okay,
it's not
well,
done.
it's been a couple years.
We just planted it in the fall, and again, the flood really did impact the plants, so we're there all the time getting the plants established.
Beyond that, I think, beyond your role, I think we did not achieve, I think, a large amount of true mitigation for that property. And that's my opinion. So it doesn't reflect on you. You know, you
No,
got a
but-
permit and you're executing the permit.
I think that was 10-to-1 mitigation and primarily lawn removal
Well, yeah. I
for
don't s-
that pool project.
I don't
It
see
was-
that when I look
It was
at
an
it.
overwhelming amount of mitigation, 9-to-1 or 10-to-1 mitigation.
Yeah, it looks very similar. Looking at Google Earth for 20 years of images, it looks very similar.
Agreed. It won't, though, I think, once the native grasses get established.
Okay.
We've had some issues with the flooding and the seed
Yeah.
not being able to establish, but.
It looks like lawn. Either
Yeah,
way, I don't want to, we're not here to talk about.
Yeah,
lawns.
no, it does still, but we're working on it.
Okay.
I think also, just to say, this lawn, I don't think it differs from maybe some of the other projects even
Yeah.
this evening. It's, you know, this isn't a pure green, one species lawn. And, you know,
I agree.
it's
It's a
not
Cape Cod lawn.
Yeah, I agree with that. So anyways, I think, that, you know, no surprises from me. That's my preference, is to try to find ways to really naturalize the 0 to 50.
Yeah.
Truly naturalize it.
All set? Jim?
I have no additional comments, John.
No comment.
Okay, I don't have any further comment either here, actually. I think I support approving this at this point.
Do you have any comments from the public?
Any public comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, my name is Jack Roby.
Please speak into the mic and
My
identify.
name is, excuse me, my name is Jack Roby. I've lived in that neighborhood my whole life. I think, you know, footprint is one thing that you guys are concerned with. I'm very happy that this is going to be a one-story house for the most part. I think it's really sensitive to the neighborhood. Excuse me, I got a dry throat. I've been sitting here all day. But I'd just like to say that I think the design is great. It's great for the neighborhood, and I fully support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone online? I don't think so.
Okay, well then, hearing no additional comments, I will make a motion that we approve the notice of intent for 23 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U4-32.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One opposed.
Okay, 5-1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Don't forget, we do have to check on 26 Old Campground, but
We do,
I don't,
yes.
yeah, but we could do that last.
Shuffle my agenda off into nowhere. Okay, next on the agenda is a notice of intent for 11 River Bend Road, map 1, parcel G1-9, for replacement of an existing wooden bulkhead, installation of floats with scallop growing nets, and dredging at the base of the bulkhead to allow for scallop rowing nets to remain submerged at low tide. Salt marsh restoration is also proposed in eroded areas.
They'd like July 3rd. It was our error. They submitted application early, so I automatically thought they wanted June 20th. And then upon looking at their application after I advertised it, it said July 3rd, so.
So I'm going to move to continue this hearing. That is 11 Riverbend Road, map 1, parcel G1-9, to July 3rd, 2024.
And I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. None opposed. Next, we have a request for a certificate of compliance for 19 and 25 Bonnie Lane, map 16, parcels C1-1 and C1-2, SC 32-2341, for the construction of a single-family home.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Attorney William Crowell from Harwich Port, representing Mr. and Mrs. DeStacio. I wanted to introduce my new law partner, Mike Donovan. Hello. And he's going to sit in this evening. He began with me about a month and a half ago. I haven't had a law partner in 46 years, so this is great. We've worked some things out, and we mesh very well. So,
Do we want to
talk about the next one also? Yes, if we
simultaneously,
could.
the conservation restriction as well?
Shall I
Why don't you announce that too?
announce?
So one's kind of contingent upon the other.
So, also, we're considering discussion and possible vote for a Bonnie Lane conservation restriction, lots 1, 2, and 4, as shown on Plan Book 599, page 88, at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds.
Thank you, Chair. We were here, I was here a year ago, and the board wanted, the commission wanted a conservation restriction executed and recorded. Amy and I subsequently had further conversations and about all of that, and then my client decided that he would like to donate most of Lot 2 and all of Lot 3 to the Harwich Conservation Trust, as opposed to putting a conservation restriction on those properties.
Pass these around.
So I approached Mike Locke from the Harwich Conservation Trust about that idea, but before I did, we had Ryder and Wilcox generate the plan that I submitted to Amy. It's dated August, let me get the right date.
May 17th.
May 17th, 2024. And that's referenced as Exhibit A on the proposed conservation restriction.
Right.
And that shows, per Amy's request, that shows all 3 lots. And what we had Dave Little of Ryder Wilcox do was to show a division on Exhibit A2, show a division of Lot 2.
You have on your table, just, sorry to interrupt you, Bill.
No, go ahead.
There's a bigger copy in the materials that were on your desk this evening. It's slightly bigger. Yes. I got it.
And that shows all 3 lots?
Correct.
Good, thank you. So the purpose of that was so that you could see on Lot 2, down at the southeast corner, it says proposed lot 2B. And it gives the small amount of square footage, and that's to accommodate the existing sand volleyball court that is shown on the plan. And then the remainder of lot 2, it says proposed lot 2A. So lot 2A would be deeded to the Harwich Conservation Trust absent lot 2B, and then all of lot 3 would be conveyed to the Harwich Conservation Trust. So they would own 2A and 3, and the DeStacios would retain lot 1 and lot 2B. 2B is owned by a trust of which they are the principal, they are the beneficiaries, so that more than likely that trust would then convey that lot 2B to the DeStacios, so it would all be in one ownership. It was in a trust for zoning purposes, just to break up lots 1, 2, and 3, to checkerboard them, so to speak, in case there were any subsequent zoning changes, but now that would be unnecessary. So we're here with the concept, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Amy has made you aware of this concept previously, of deeding to the Harwich Conservation Trust, and the commission was in favor of that in principle?
In principle.
Okay. So we developed the plan by Ryder and Wilcox, and this is a as-built plan. And if the commission sees its way to approving this project and this concept, then Ryder and Wilcox would have to go to the planning board for an approval not required plan, what they call an A&R plan, approval not required, to show the subdivision of lot 2 into 2A and 2B. Once that plan gets approved by the planning board, I can record that plan at the Registry of Deeds, and then I can deed pursuant to that plan. I can deed 2A and 3 to the Harwich Conservation Trust, and then deed 2B to the DeStacios, who already own lot 1. Part and parcel of that would be, we're requesting that the existing orders of conditions, I believe they were almost identical, but it was because there were 2 different owners, the trust and the DeStacios.
Yes.
We're requesting certificates of compliance for those orders of condition, and we would be executing the proposed conservation restriction that Amy and I have spent quite some time on refining the wording per her request. And I believe she's
I'm good with it.
good with it. Words said music to my ears. Didn't know if I'd ever hear those.
And that's for lot 1, as
That's
shown
for
on the
lot
plan.
1.
The part of lot 1 that does not contain the house.
Correct. So on Exhibit A, which is part of the conservation restriction,
Which is what I just handed you. So,
Excuse me,
sorry.
clarify that last statement. This conservation restriction is for lot 1? Is that what you
Yes.
just said?
that's what I was going to try to clarify
Yes.
next,
Okay.
if I may. So because we're going to deed the property, 2A and 3, to the Harwich Conservation Trust, it doesn't need to be encumbered by the conservation restriction, was our thinking. And 2B would be retained by my clients, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't need to have a conservation restriction on 2B.
Nope, because we agreed 1 foot off the limit of work is where that's gonna be lot 2, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
So on lot 1, when you look at that plan, you will see that Ryder and Wilcox put in where it says proposed conservation restriction in the middle of lot 1, just to the right of where it identifies it as lot 1, it says proposed conservation restriction, and then it has arrows that point to the limits of that conservation restriction, and it basically goes to the split rail fence that surrounds the dwelling, and then it goes up along the northwesterly side of the gravel drive. So all of Lot 1, north of the split rail fence and west of the split rail fence, would be encumbered by the conservation restriction, except we asked for 1 foot beyond the split rail fence in case a stray volleyball or wiffle ball went over the fence. They didn't want to be violating the conservation restriction by going over the fence and getting the ball.
Or a little pruning, just to keep the fence.
Or a little pruning and maintaining the fence.
Free of vines and stuff.
Yes. So that's what Amy and I worked on, and I came up with the language in Exhibit A that you have before you tonight that says Lot 1 is encumbered by the conservation restriction, and then there's the paragraph that says, except this conservation restriction shall not apply to that area beyond the proposed conservation restriction on Lot 1, as shown on the May 17th plan, and any area within 1 foot from the proposed conservation restriction on the northwesterly, westerly, and southwesterly sides thereof, i.e., 1 foot from the split rail fence shown on said plan. You're good with that also?
Works for me.
Okay, and that's what we had talked about and agreed to. So Lot 2A and 2B and Lot 3 are not part of the conservation restriction. That's my explanation for the chair and for the board. I also, just in thinking about it later, since Lot 2 is not involved, then William Litchfield, trustee of the Spinnaker Lane Nominee Trust, doesn't need to sign the conservation restriction. It just makes it a lot easier. It's just on Lot 1.
Correct.
So the overall plan is to hopefully obtain your approval this evening, certificates of compliance, approval of the conservation restriction in front of you. Then we go to the, Ryder and Wilcox goes to the planning board for the approval not required plan. I record that at the registry of deeds. And then we deed 2A and 3 to the Harwich Conservation Trust, 2B to the D'Estacios, execute the conservation restriction and record that at the same time at the registry of deeds, give you copies, and hopefully everybody would be happy.
Amy, what do you have to say about this?
I'm very happy to see this coming to a conclusion as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, if I may, I forgot one thing. Mike Locke is online, and I've communicated with Mike. Thank you for being there, Mike. And he walked the property, and he said that this was June 5th. He said he was just out there this morning, and the lots provide important wildlife habitat. And on behalf of HCT Board of Trustees, I appreciate that James and Janice D'Estacio and you on their behalf are able to permanently protect the lots by donating them to HCT. So I think it's fair to say Mr. Locke is in favor of this plan. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
So I think this accomplishes what the commission set out for back in 2017. And what the commission set out for, the order in 2017 said everything beyond the limit of work, which is the split rail fence, because a permanent split rail fence was installed as the limit of work, as per the order of conditions. Then everything beyond that, 1 foot, which I understand the desire for that 1 foot off, and I don't think it's a big deal, be under a conservation restriction. I think by putting Lot 2A and Lot 3, or by donating that to the Harwich Conservation Trust, accomplishes that. And then putting the remainder of Lot 1, that's beyond the split rail fence, under a conservation restriction, either held by the town or the trust, accomplishes the intent of your conditions for that permit, which I do have here with me if anybody wants to see it. The only thing I would be hesitant about, Bill, is issuing certificates of compliance tonight when this hasn't been done yet.
Understood.
So my recommendation would not be to issue certificates of compliance and not vote on that until this has been executed.
Once it's executed, may I ask, do you have any issues at this time, if it's all executed?
My remaining issues there, and I haven't been out in the past couple of weeks, but continued treatment of the lawn areas with fertilizers and pesticides. It appears that the lawn is somehow being treated, and it should not be happening. And let me just take one quick little look at the rest of the conditions. There. And it looked like, so I know that there was permanent irrigation installed. The only thing that was allowed within our jurisdiction was temporary. And that was temporary for 2 growing seasons to establish the native grasses and plantings. And check on, I believe there was one dry well, or there was one roof runoff downspout that may not have gone into dry wells, but I could be incorrect. But it was mostly the care of the lawn, and I wouldn't be opposed to necessarily the irrigation, but I'm opposed to if there's any ongoing chemical additives being put on that lawn.
If you could live with the irrigation.
Well, that's me, I don't think I'd say for them.
No, I meant the board. If the board could live with the irrigation as is, that would be good. I think we could address certainly fertilizer and pesticides. I will point out that the 100-foot buffer, when you look at the plan that you have in front of you, the 100-foot buffer ends right between the volleyball court and the shed there, and then it goes up and it just catches one corner of the house. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but anything beyond, outside of that 100-foot buffer could be irrigated and fertilized and pesticided and everything else, because it's not within the board's jurisdiction. So it's really it's really
all-
the
yeah.
half of that area, not the full area.
Right, which is a large section of lawn.
Understood. So if we could keep the irrigation that's there, I think my client certainly would go along with the fertilizer and pesticide
Yeah.
prohibition.
All set?
I'm all set.
No comment. Jim? I have no comment.
Boy, this one goes back. Who could remember all this? It sounds reasonable, but my concern, there was, one of the conditions said no irrigation.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have a concern with that. The irrigation is probably all in this 50 to 100, I believe.
Yeah, because there was nothing in the 50 that we didn't allow anything in the 50 at all, so.
So
Any activity.
That's the one sticky point. I mean, we hear in good faith all the time how things are gonna go, and they just don't go that way. It just keeps happening with these lawn practices. So that's my one concern remaining.
If I may ask one question on that, Chair? Is that something the board could now waive if it chose to?
They could grant the certificate of compliance, well, not right now, but upon execution of this, the commission could vote to grant a cert.
Thank you.
Or not, yeah.
No questions.
So, my issue with this, I'm not so concerned about irrigation. I'm very concerned about the lawn, because people ignore that prohibition all the time, and we told them, I remember being out there a couple of years ago and
Yeah.
looking at the very green lawn, and people have been told, that they can't do this, and they do it anyway. So if we grant a certificate of compliance now, based on some assurance that there will no longer be any lawn treatment, that doesn't fly in my case. I mean, I would hate to interfere with this basically good plan of transferring all this land to the Conservation Trust, and I think it's a great thing and we should do it, but it floors me that people keep ignoring this business about pouring bad things onto their lawn so they can have a bright green lawn, and compromising our waterways. I just don't get it. Honestly, I don't get it. I don't get why people will not listen, and I'm sorry, I will get off my soapbox, but it's a serious problem we have in this town.
Understood. If I may ask, in an ordinary order of conditions, not this property, some other property, and you put a restriction in like that, what's the enforcement action that you would normally take?
We have fined once or twice.
And I disagree, I go back further than anyone here, we've twice had irrigation systems removed.
Yeah, we've
from
had an
0 to
irrigation
50.
system removed.
We've done that twice, and that goes back a ways. 50 to 100 foot?
But that wasn't my question, Mr. Chase. It wasn't irrigation. It was when you say no fertilizers, no pesticides, what's your enforcement action to that? Because you're saying that it's ignored, but it's not just this property. You're suggesting that it's all properties. What enforcement action do you have?
It is problematic, because if we want to enforce it, we have to prove that this is happening. You can't just say, your lawn is too green. But the enforcement is problematic, but that's not really the point. I mean, maybe enforcement is making a complicated transaction like this difficult, just to make the point. You can't be pouring fertilizer on your lawn within jurisdictional areas for the Conservation Commission. And bland reassurances don't cut it.
Understood.
I don't know how to proceed
And
here.
I'm trying to look at the overall picture and the overall game plan of what's the town and the environment going to gain by this proposal, and I think both the environment and the town win with the proposal before you. And if enforcement of fertilizer and pesticides is not something that can be accomplished, then I think in the order of priorities, there's a bigger win for the town and the environment.
Amy.
So I thought tonight I didn't understand that one was contingent upon the other. I thought that it was going to be, this is going to go through that you wanted the commission's support to proceed with what you're doing, which is to give the 2 parcels to the Conservation Trust and have another parcel be restricted. And then after that has happened, then we would consider the certificate of compliance. I didn't know that I thought that they were mutually exclusive, essentially. Like, I didn't know that we had to agree.
I'm not saying that you have to, but as you suggested at the beginning, they're kind of part and parcel. They go hand in hand, and this was part of my client's thinking in saying, well, how can we resolve this? And he came up with the idea of, why don't I give these 2 lots to the Conservation Trust? But I would like to be done with it all when I do that.
Well, your client did agree upon receipt of the orders of conditions to not fertilize, add herbicides, and add pesticides. That was part of the agreement that your client entered into in the orders of conditions. So, and those parcels still would need to be either restricted or donated. So that was the agreement made then.
In 2017, I'm not denying that. I wasn't part of that back then. But I'm trying to resolve the situation for all concerned, and I cannot sit here tonight and guarantee to you that we can separate these.
Mhm.
I don't have the authority to say that. I do have the authority to say, if we go forward this way, that he would be willing to donate 2A and 3 to the Harwich Conservation Trust.
Well, here's a simple question, Mr. Kroll. Do you have the authority to even give us the bland reassurance that he will no longer put anything on his lawn?
I said that 2 times earlier tonight, yes, that he would not put the fertilizer and the pesticides on his lawn.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So my recommendation to you is that you agree to let them go forward with going to the planning board and pursue giving the 2 lots to the Harwich Conservation Trust, and that you have Mr. Kroll draft, because I think this is in 2017, so it'd be revised. I think we're gonna need signature pages on this conservation restriction.
I have them, they're part of it.
I'm sorry. So tonight,
And they're dated
So-
2024.
so tonight, you could agree to the conservation restriction on Lot 1 and let them pursue doing what they need to do to give lots 2A and 3 to the Conservation Trust. And then we kind of see where, then I do another certificate, then I do another compliance check after that, all that happens. Maybe I do one now, take some photos, and then I do one, again, once we're ready, and we go from there.
Yeah, I understand. If you're asking for signature pages for this commission.
Yes.
I don't have a signature
Okay.
page for that. And I'm going to amend the signature page I have to take Mr. Litchfield as trustee off of
That's
that.
right, okay.
That's what you're referring to. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
So to accomplish what you just described, what specific actions would we have to take here this evening?
I could say that you could make a motion that you would agree that to satisfy the requirement of the order of conditions that dealt with the conservation restriction for this project, that donating lots 2 and 3 to the 2A and 3 to the Harwich Conservation Trust, and putting a restriction on Lot 1, basically approving the as-built plan dated May 17th, 2024, would satisfy condition number, special condition number 2 of the order of conditions.
Yes. It's condition 2.
Right, special condition number 2.
Did you take in enough of that to make a motion?
Well, I have a little bit of concern about that as to why we have to go that far with regard to discussing what we would discuss in the approval of the certificate of compliance. I can understand why they may need us to approve the conservation restriction shown to us tonight for Lot 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that they can proceed, but the other items are, the conveyance to the Harwich Conservation Trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the order of conditions which they need a certificate of compliance.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand why we have to vote on that part of it tonight when the issue of the certificate of compliance is going to come back to us?
I think it's just to give your client some assurance that you're heading in the right, that this is the right direction, that the commission, I mean, whether it's consensus or a vote,
Because you
that
you
this
have
is
to
the right
spend money on
direction.
the plan and go to the planning board, not record the plan until we come back and discuss the certificates of
Right.
compliance, and not record the conservation restriction until that gets resolved, one way or the other.
So,
And I guess that's what I just completely do not understand. Why that has to be voted upon by us tonight, because what I think we're doing is we're basically taking a large step towards voting on the certificate of compliance, where, you know, I hear there are other issues with regard to the certificate of compliance, which we're going to discuss at another date.
I think there's other issues, I think there's separate, but,
Well, they may be separate issues.
right.
But, I mean, I just have some concern about going any further with a vote than approving what is shown to us tonight as the draft conservation restriction for Lot 1.
Mhm.
And that, I think I'm completely in favor of, and I'm completely in favor of the rest of the scheme also. But that was in the order of conditions from 2017. So that's a requirement of the order of conditions.
So how about this? How about instead of?
I'm not
even-
asking for, I didn't ask for a vote.
No, you just, sorry, it's consensus, or basically, are you in favor of them donating 2 lots to the trust and having 1 lot restricted?
But again, the donut, isn't that part of the order of conditions?
No, it actually says, well, it says they should all be a conservation restriction.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's another way of accomplishing the same thing, protecting the land.
To answer your question, yes.
Anyone else care to speak up and voice an opinion?
Just about the land, either donation or restriction.
Makes all the sense in the world to me.
Not,
What's that?
Tom Evans would like to speak.
Yes, sir. Tom?
No, I'm sorry, I did not put my hand up. I had a chat earlier when we lost communication with you folks for a couple of minutes, but we were back.
Okay.
So I would defer to Mike if he has anything he wants to offer. Mike, you're on mute, just letting you know.
That's what,
Yeah, hi,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Eric Attorney Kroll, did you want to speak?
You go first, Mike, please.
So as Attorney Kroll mentioned, Harwich Conservation Trust would accept donation of lots 2A and 3 to permanently preserve the habitats thereon. And the Harwich Conservation Trust Board of Trustees would review and take a vote accordingly.
So if I may, Chair, yes, looking for a consensus from the board as opposed to no opinion before we proceed with expending more money for the approval not required plan. So if the board, if the consensus is no, that this overall plan is not going to work, then I'd appreciate knowing that this evening.
So what I'm going to do, excuse me.
No, go ahead, John.
I'm going to summarize where I think the commission is coming from, and then I'll give my fellow commissioners a chance to contradict me and tell me I'm wrong. And hopefully I'm not wrong, but try to summarize this. That is, I would say, and I hope that all the commissioners are in favor of the overall plan of the donation of the two lots, 2A and 3, to the Harwich Conservation Trust, and the additional conservation restriction on parts of Lot 1. But there is some concern about other compliance issues. Anybody care to add to or subtract from that?
Yeah, John?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with what you said. And I think the issue is that this, whether or not this scheme, that we're agreeing that this scheme will fulfill whatever section of the order of conditions that required the conservation easements. So that we're saying that the scheme that you're proposing to us tonight would fulfill that that singular requirement of the order of conditions, and that we would be in agreement with that.
Yes.
Could the chair poll the other members of the board for their thoughts on that?
Asking for further comments. Nobody's contradicting me. I don't want to, we're not going to have a vote here, so I'm not sure polling, anybody here has a chance to speak up and contradict what I just said. If they don't, I take that as agreement. And if they don't agree with that.
I agree with what you said, John,
Okay.
so,
All
number
right.
one.
I think that's the best we can do for that. And
Understood. Thank you. So I'll talk with my client, and he'll decide whether, they will decide whether to proceed with the planning board approval not required plan. I suspect that they will, and we'll go forward with that piece.
Yep.
And then ask to come back before you, once that plan has been approved and is in recordable form. Not going to record it until I come back and we discuss the certificate of compliance issues.
Please keep me in the loop with your process with the planning
Absolutely.
board.
Absolutely. I've tried to all along.
I know, you do good. And my office is right next to the town planner, so it should make my life easier.
It's been a long night for everybody. Thank you for your time and
Yes, thank
consideration.
you.
Hopefully you're done.
Thank you all.
We got
Thank you.
we have 2 orders of conditions, which are on your table, because I did them today. Sorry.
Okay, so orders of conditions, I reviewed them. I don't have any problem with them.
Same here.
I had no
Same here.
problem.
So so, yeah. You could do one joint motion for both, as long as you announce them both.
Okay, I'll announce them. The order of
Or in his
conditions
motion.
for 3 Longview Lane, map 104, parcel N3-2, to construct an elevated timber stairway over an existing footpath, and an order of conditions for 2 Paradise Path, map 72, parcel W4, for reconstruction of beach access steps and mitigation plantings. Okay?
Second.
No, we haven't made a motion yet.
I assume that was a move.
It's late. I'll make the motion and I'll make it quick. I move that we close the public hearings and authorize the issuance of orders of conditions for the following properties. 1, 3 Longview Lane, map 104, parcel N3-2, and 2 Paradise Path, map 72, parcel W4.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. We have minutes here, but I
We
don't
do
think
not.
we have
We
any
do not.
minutes. There's nothing else on the agenda. I would just like to personally thank Mr. Fred Chase, Mr. Jim Atkinson for their service on the Conservation Commission. 15 years, and I happened to be somewhat pathologically watching a little bit of the selectmen's meeting on video, and your service was commended at, I think, this past week's selectmen's meeting. Your 15 years of service. I don't know what else to say.
I think that's it.
I mean, I would have said, let's go out for a beer, but I've kind of had it.
It's fitting that we hit 10 o'clock. Most of my tenure, we had long meetings.
Yeah, this is a longer meeting
But
than we've
very
had in a
recent, we've
while.
had short meetings, but many long meetings, so this is perfect.
This is perfect.
Brad and Jim, it's been a true pleasure to have both of you. Brad, ever since I started 12 years ago. But you're not getting away, because you both have expertise that I'm going to rely on.
Yeah.
And you can, Amy, and I just want to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed my term on the Conservation Commission. I would like to thank Amy, John, Brad, and all the members of the Conservation Commission for their extreme knowledge, which has been very helpful to me in executing my role as a member of this commission.
I've always enjoyed listening to your legal mind.
Well, thank you.
Really,
Thank
when
you,
you come
Lee.
up with stuff, I've said there, go, wow.
Well, somehow we're gonna have to conjure a legal mind out
Yeah, really, we're gonna-
of the rest of us, you know.
Yeah, you each do have a little gift.
Thank you. Thank you,
So,
Amy.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Amy.
All right, John, carry on. Good.
so that being said, the remaining four of you, are you gonna be here July 3rd?
Should be. I mean, yeah, because I'm not going anywhere over the holidays.
I'll be here.
Okay. It's
John,
not,
You have to appoint somebody to make motions.
Oh, you haven't got anybody in the,
I'm
on
too scared
standby?
I'm gonna mess it up.
I gave an
You started out
interview
good.
on the Harwich channel.
fine.
I
I
have
think
feelers
you're-
everywhere.
Couple, right?
I don't think I did.
You're gonna be our motion maker from
You have
now
no
on.
choice.
Says who?
I said.
Chair can assign that to you.
If someone writes me a
Jim's taking the
script,
pressure
I'll
off of all
read
of
it.
us.
Oh, you need a
Really?
motion, you need an adjourn.
We need an adjourn motion.
We do.
I'll make my final
There you
motion.
go.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, all those in favor? Aye.
Yeah.